Chapter 361. You can search Transmigration System, Adonis, come to Sashu. Come on Baidu to find the S. Wei Bai, better than a beast in human skin. Chiu Bai, since you and your disciple don't even care about your face, I'll clean you up today. With that, the sword charged over, wanting to kill Ning Yishu. Wei Bai cursed, not again. The little bit of spirit chi she had gathered turned into a water sleeve, wrapping around the useless main character and tossing him to the side. Although there was a theory that the main character wouldn't die. Who knew if there were any accidents in this damned world? If Ning Yishu died, she would lose so much life points to save him. Throwing away the useless male lead who was in the way, Wei searched the memories of this body's cultivation. She immediately formed a hand seal, and the water beside her turned into countless spirit swords that shot towards Chiu Bai. Chiu Bai laughed coldly. You overestimate yourself. If Wei Bai wasn't injured, she could still fight with him. Now, she was just waiting for death. Chiu Bai's sword split, turning into thousands of swords that gave out a cold hiss, shattering her water swords. Wei Bai's chest tightened. I feel like it's good to buy a cheat on credit. Is there anything I can use to kill him? The system flipped around. Only the brainless pills are on sale, do you want it? Wei Bai, this weird name, I have a bad feeling. Buy it. She hesitated and wasn't sure. System, purchase complete, user Chiu Bai. Those long swords were about to pierce Wei's body, just before she was about to die. Chiu Bai, who had eaten the brainless pills, suddenly retracted his sword. He laughed out loud. Junior sister, I just remembered that you haven't lost your primordial yin, right? Wei Bai, the system kindly repeated, I'm asking if you're a virgin. Chiu Bai walked towards her step by step. Although taking your yin won't do me any good and will even hinder your cultivation, seeing you die without experiencing the joy of being a man makes my heart hurt. Wei Bai knocked on the system with her dead fish eyes. Is this the effect of the brainless pills? This must be a strong fucking film. The system said, by the time he regains consciousness, you're already dead. Brain damage pills can lower a person's IQ to that of an animal. You know animals, other than eating, they also mate. Wei Bai, you dumb *SS, give me back my life points. Chiu Bai charged resolutely in front of Wei Bai. He reached out and grabbed her hair. With a sinister smile, he said, that useless disciple of yours can't do anything other than kiss you. Why don't you let senior brother satisfy you? After he finished speaking, he suddenly stretched out his hand and grabbed Ning Yishu, who was about to escape. Ning Yishu let out a muffled groan and fell to the ground. He discovered that his limbs were powerless, bound by an inexplicable force. Damn it, am I going to die here today? Ning Yishu looked up and his pupils constricted. Chiu Bai had already ripped open Wei Bai's collar. Her pure white shoulder pierced his eyes. The bloodthirsty impulse in his heart turned into sharp thorns. It was painful, but also inexplicable. For a woman like Wei Bai, whatever she suffered had nothing to do with him. Just as he was thinking this, he heard her voice become filled with fear. Get out of my way. Our techniques clash, you won't gain anything by doing this. She had lost her arrogant and cold mask, leaving only a panicked and helpless expression. She had always been the one tormenting others viciously. The first time he saw her being humiliated, Ning Yishu discovered that he didn't feel happy at all. Chapter 362. Chiu Brainless Bai didn't want to listen. Why do I have to get benefits for doing things, as long as I'm happy? Wei Bai, as expected, he was brainless. He didn't even want benefits and just wanted to mate with her. As a vicious and stupid supporting female lead, she had to show a proper reaction at this time. She immediately became afraid and started to flatter, "Senior brother, isn't it just a body? As long as you don't kill me, I'm willing to be your slave or concubine." When she said this, she didn't know why, but she felt a chill down her spine. She looked up and saw Ning Yishu looking at her sinisterly. It was as if her words had stepped on his reverse scale. Qiu Bai was stunned. "Junior sister is really smart. If you had done this earlier, I wouldn't have been so rude." Wei Wei Bai said, "Then senior brother, release me." Qiu Bai chuckled, "Do you think I'm stupid? How can you be obedient if I release you? But seeing how sincere you are, even if there aren't any benefits, I'll release you." Wei Wei Bai. She felt like a brainless halo was shining above this person's head. Qiu Bai had just released her. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and forcefully condensed a thread of sharp spirit energy that was about to stab into his body. But Qiu Bai waved his hand and scattered her spirit energy. Then he slapped her face. "You actually dare to resist at such a time." Wei Wei Bai didn't feel pain, but her eyes immediately turned red. "Slag stem, he hit my face." The system wanted to comfort her. But then it heard her say, "I'm so beautiful, he's so blind to actually hit my face. That's like a work of art." "System, what is face? Do you have one?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes suddenly turned red and her face was filled with humiliation. Only then did she remember that Ning Yishu was beside her. "Trash, close your eyes." No matter how vicious she was still a woman. She couldn't just stand there and watch. Ning Yishu couldn't move. He clearly knew that he should close his eyes. But he couldn't suppress the violent bloodthirsty impulse in his heart. Humiliation. He actually found himself feeling humiliated. Wei Wei Bai saw him staring at her and became angry. She used the last of her strength and slapped him across the air. "Close your eyes and don't look." This was Wei Wei Bai's character, violent and vicious. Even though she was in such a sorry state, she still treated him like she was dealing with an ant, beating him to the point where he couldn't even fight back. Ning Yishu felt humiliated. Just as he was about to close his eyes, he saw Wei Wei Bai's eyes turn red and tears flow uncontrollably. When he was tortured by her in the past, it wasn't that he hadn't thought about how he would let her die a miserable death. But when she was really tortured to this extent, however, he realized that he didn't feel the slightest bit of pleasure from getting his revenge. Qiu Bai laughed out loud. "Ha, why did you ask your disciple to close her eyes? You should show him how happy you are." After saying that, his pig claws were about to attack her chest. Crackle, shouldn't it be pa-pa-pa? Why was there such a sound effect? Wei Wei Bai and Qiu Bai turned their heads at the same time, only to see Ning Yishu's eyes turn red with a golden glow. He lay on the ground, staring at them. His fingers grabbed the sand, the veins on the back of his hand protruding as a golden glow flowed through his meridians. His muscles let out crackling sounds. A layer of golden light faintly appeared on his skin. Ning Yishu seemed to have lost his mind, a cold, bestial light flowing in his eyes. Let go of her. Below to record this reading record. Chapter 363. Wei Wei Bai said, "The male lead's pure yang energy exploded." Didn't he explode because he wanted to escape from the hidden realm's danger? Why did it happen earlier? The system said, since it happened in the hidden realm, it doesn't count as the plot breaking. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, she relaxed. Qiu Bai had a shocked expression on his face. Although his brain was damaged, he still had the necessary reactions. When he saw Ning Yishu's change, he hurriedly took out his flying sword. However, when the sword flew over, it suddenly went out of control. Qiu Bai couldn't care less about Wei Wei Bai and immediately jumped up. White spirit energy wrapped around the flying sword. He grabbed the sword and flew in front of Ning Yishu, wanting to kill him in one strike. Ning Yishu suddenly went crazy. The restraints on his body were broken by the golden light. A huge wave of energy crazily surged out. The golden light was like a hurricane, forcing Qiu Bai's sword back. Qiu Bai was shocked. What kind of power was this? Ning Yishu didn't give him any chance to retreat. His mind was heavy as a terrifying power surged within him. A stubborn thought kept appearing in his heart. Kill him, kill this man. It wasn't like he had never been humiliated before, but today was the first time he was angrier than ever. Qiu Bai was a nascent soul expert. Even if Ning Yishu suddenly exploded with terrifying power, he still couldn't do anything. How could he not have the ability to retaliate? Just as he was about to use a big move, he suddenly realized that his spirit energy was being drained. Wei Bai felt the same. The hidden realm started to absorb everyone's spirit energy. However, Ning Yishu wasn't affected at all. He suddenly grabbed Qiu Bai's sword and punched him. In the sky of the hidden realm, the 6 moons turned into 6 giant eyes. Everyone in the hidden realm started to lose their spirit energy. Qiu Bai was shocked and terrified. He realized that he didn't have any strength left. He couldn't even resist. Ning Yishu's heart surged with rage. He risked his life and beat Qiu Bai to death. Soon, Qiu Bai was beaten beyond recognition. A normal youth beating a nascent soul cultivator. Wei Bai felt that this novel was too brainless. Suddenly, the bruised and swollen Qiu Bai reacted. He suddenly flew to Bai Weiwei's side and reached out to grab her neck. Your master is in my hands, don't come over. Ning Yishu gasped for breath. He only felt a crazy power rushing through his body. The pain made him break out in a cold sweat. He saw Bai Weiwei weak and held hostage. Her black hair was disheveled, and her dress was stained with blood. Her face was pale, and the tips of her brows were covered in frost. It was like she would shatter. His mind went blank, and the image of her humiliating him flashed before his eyes. Instead, it was the appearance of her wide sleeves fluttering in the wind, her ink-black hair draped over her shoulders, and she looked like she was flying. Also, when she was killing monsters, her gait was slow and graceful, and her confidence was beautiful. Only be calm. It had nothing to do with the fact that she had a vicious heart and a snake on the inside. It was just a man's impression of a woman's beauty. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 8. The system was shocked. What's going on? How did the affection increase? Wei Bai was also stunned. It's probably because he found out that a trash like himself can also save a beauty, so he has a good impression of me. System, damn, so the male lead is such a superficial person. No, it should be said that the host is using all kinds of methods to praise her beauty. Ning Yishu suddenly raised his head and frowned. It was like he had seen something inconceivable. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. To record this reading. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 364. Qiu Bai, who had eaten brainless pills, also looked at it with him and saw a shocking scene. The moon turned into a huge eye, and the eyeball slowly rotated in the sky. This scene was so terrifying that it made one's hair stand on end. Who knew how many people in the secret realm had their spirit energy sucked away? The higher one's cultivation, the faster they would be affected. The moment Qiu Bai looked up, there was a cracking sound as his wrist was broken. Wei Bai saw Ning Yishu's figure move so quickly that it was terrifying. Qiu Bai, who was strangling her, was dragged away by Ning Yishu in the blink of an eye. Ning Yishu calmly took out the blood-stained dagger. Under Qiu Bai's unwilling gaze, he stabbed it into his body. The dagger drank blood and sucked it with all its might. Soon, the man who wanted to do something to Wei Wei Bai died under his dagger. This was Ning Yishu's first time killing someone. But his heart was unmoved. Wei Wei Bai lay on the ground and couldn't see what Ning Yishu was doing. What is he doing? The system said. He stabbed the dagger into brainless Bai's body and rotated it 360 degrees to widen the wound. Then, he took out the dagger and stabbed it in another place. Bai Weiwei, how much hatred, how much resentment, to torture people like this. The male lead is really perverted. The system reminded, he's coming. Wei Wei Bai thought about that pitiful 8 favorability. This was going to be extremely difficult. She looked up and saw Ning Yishu slowly walking over, treading on the messy traces of a fight. The eerie light shone on his well-defined face. His eyes were red and there was a terrifying killing intent on his face. The dark energy that sucked in spirit energy couldn't do anything to him. Wei Wei Bai felt dizzy and couldn't even sit up. She could only look at him in a daze. Master. Ning Yishu bowed, his wooden expression long gone. His face was still expressionless, but with a few more traces of emotion, his entire face seemed to come alive. Wei Wei Bai thought about her response. Then she raised her eyebrows angrily. You know magic? He questioned coldly, as if he did not see the murderous intent in his eyes. Ning Yishu lowered his eyes, still holding the dagger in his hand. Kill her, this thought appeared so easily, but when it came to taking action, it was so hesitant. To maintain her stupid and vicious persona, Wei Wei Bai was crying in her heart, but on the surface, she continued to seek death. Why didn't you say that you could cultivate? You made me be laughed at for so many years. True enough. Ning Yishu mocked herself in her heart. A selfish person like her only had eyes for herself. Forget it. She suddenly sighed. Ning Yishu looked up in confusion. However, she struggled to get closer and said coldly, You can stay in Grand Heaven's Mountain and be my, Wei Wei Bai's, first disciple. If you can cultivate, I won't chase you away. The original owner took Ning Yishu in because he was a genius with a single spirit root. She wanted to nurture a good disciple. So this was not considered a violation of her persona. When Ning Yishu heard this, his fingers that were tightly holding the dagger loosened. In the next second, Wei Wei Bai's lips were already kissing him. Her body was weak to the point of being pitiful, and she urgently needed a large amount of pure yang energy. Ning Yishu once again gripped the dagger tightly. For this kind of woman who used him as a tool, what was he hesitating for, just as his murderous intent surged? Wei Wei Bai carelessly licked the roof of his mouth. He suddenly trembled, a wave of numbness spreading through his entire body. Ning Yishu's face immediately flushed red. The intense power in his body instantly calmed down. A simple kiss from her had left him in a sorry state. // Chapter 365. Bai Weiwei was also nervous, afraid that he would stab her, this old witch who ate young grass, to death. Fortunately, Ning Yishu was still traumatized from killing someone, so he spared her life. Because she was absorbing the energy from his body, she was not affected by the arcane realm, so she could barely stand up. Ning Yishu suddenly squatted down in silence. Master, I'll carry you. His voice was slightly hoarse. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while. This young man, did she turn him into a masochist so quickly? Or was this a trap? She had just begged for a piggyback, and now he was stabbing her. If she continued to hesitate, she would probably break her character. She had no choice but to break the boat and lay on his back. Ning Yishu immediately carried her. He was too nervous to notice that she was so light. She was so light that she was like a feather. When they passed by Qiu Bai's corpse, Wei Wei Bai suddenly said coldly, "Go over." Ning Yishu walked over without hesitation. "Give him a few good kicks." "Oh right, step on his face while you're at it." Wei Wei Bai did not look at the corpse, afraid that she would have nightmares. But she had to take revenge for the face slapping. Ning Yishu was speechless. Thinking of something, Ning Yishu's face turned gloomy. Then, he kicked Qiu Bai a few times and stepped on his face. He had to make this corpse look even uglier. Wei Wei Bai said, "Am I going to die so miserably in the future too?" The system said, "No. It's much worse than this. I have a drawing of the original owner before he died, do you want to see it?" Wei Wei Bai said, "Did he die very miserably?" The system said, "Very miserably." Wei Wei Bai said firmly, "Miserably." Ning Yishu finished trampling on Qiu Bai and was about to leave. Wei Wei Bai added, "Take his natal magic weapon, brocade pouch and money pouch." Ning Yishu, cruel, vicious, and greedy. Did his master not have any good points? Ning Yishu accepted his fate and searched for Qiu Bai's things before placing them in his bag. The result of this trip to the secret realm was for the male lead to plunder the belongings of many dead people. Therefore, whenever Wei Wei Bai saw a dead person along the way, she would ask him to search their money bags. Ning Yishu was expressionless. He was crazy about money. He wouldn't even let go of a dead person. After collecting most of her belongings, Wei Wei Bai asked the system to bring up the map of the secret territory. She planned to use the male lead's aura to walk out of the secret territory. She asked casually, "Do you know how to get out of here?" If he said that he didn't know, she would be able to act cool. Ning Yishu respectfully replied, "I know, master. I've seen the map of this place." After saying this, he fell into a suspicious silence before calmly saying, "There's something wrong with this secret territory. I will carry master out." This wasn't nonsense. Anyone could see that something was wrong with those 6 shining eyes in the sky. Wei Wei Bai nodded. "Then walk faster. I'm tired." Her wounds were only temporarily sealed. Although she had used painkillers, the tiredness wouldn't go away. Ning Yishu lowered his eyes, his gloomy expression unchanged. "Yes, master." Then, Wei Wei Bai discovered that Ning Yishu's route wasn't right. She flipped through the map. This route was the Labyrinth of Illusions. In the Labyrinth of Illusions, there was a beast that specifically guarded the blushed flower. The secret territory was a trap, but the treasures inside were real. Ning Yishu actually didn't care about the strangeness of the secret territory. Relying on the fact that he wasn't affected, he actually wanted to pick the blushed flower. Chapter 366. With such a strong heart, it was no wonder he could become a god. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. "Slagstem, Ning Yishu isn't planning to feed me to the guardian beast, is he?" The system said, "I looked through the data. The guardian beast loves the flesh of living women the most. No wonder Ning Yishu did not stab her to death. He wanted to feed her to the beast." Wei Wei Bai's brain worked hard. If this continued, she would have to say goodbye. It was too difficult for Ning Yishu to have a good impression of a vicious woman. The previous 8 points of favorability were probably due to her being the most beautiful woman in the world. After all, people liked beautiful things. No matter how vicious a flower was, some people would have a good impression of it. This was their instinct. However, this kind of favorability was too shallow. Not breaking the character setting, Wei Wei Bai searched through the original owner's past, then suddenly she knocked on the system. Well, villains have a past too, right? The system said, yes. Then what was the original owner's past? She flipped through the novel but could not find it. Her memory was also a blur. The system said, the author is lazy, there is no setting. No wonder her memory was blurry. Wei Wei Bai said, then can I fill it in? The system said, 5 days of life. Wei Wei Bai, the system said, and you fill in the setting, you still have to make Ning Yishu think you're vicious. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. Can I make him feel pity for me? The system said, yes, but you can't break your vicious personality. Wei Wei Bai thought, how obsessed are you with being vicious and vicious? Ning Yishu walked towards the labyrinth of illusion step by step. He knew that there was a mythical beast guarding the flower. And that mythical beast loved women's flesh the most. The power he had just unleashed made him even more convinced that his spirit route was blocked. That was because the power was intermittent. If it wasn't blocked, how could it be like this? He couldn't beat the guardian beast alone. And Wei Wei Bai was undoubtedly the perfect bait. Thinking of this, he felt a little depressed. Ning Yishu suppressed that feeling. Every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Besides, a woman like Wei Wei Bai should have died long ago. Ning Yishu's nature was to endure silently, have a cold heart, and take revenge for any enmity. Seeing the appearance of the labyrinth of illusions, Ning Yishu's footsteps paused. His expression was gloomy as he struggled for a moment before finally stepping in. As he walked, he comforted her with a gentle voice, Master, we will be able to get out of here very soon. Martial Uncle is dead, so Grand Heaven Mountain will be your world in the future. Wei Wei Bai weakly sneered, don't call that bitch Martial Uncle. Once we get out, there's no need to punish me with a whip. Just help me heal my damaged meridians. Ning Yishu was very gentle, okay, it's this disciple's honor to be able to serve Master. But his expression was terrifyingly cold. She clearly knew that too little spiritual energy could destroy a person's spirit root, but Wei Wei Bai still used him without any psychological burden. After entering the labyrinth, he pretended to walk around a few times. We seem to be lost, Master. Wei Wei Bai didn't answer. She was so weak that she fainted. Ning Yishu said very cautiously, Master, wait here. I'll go find a way out. After waiting for a while, he was sure that she had really fainted. Only then did he slowly put her down and let her lean against a rock, directly facing the entrance of the guardian beast. She was covered in blood, her clothes were torn, and some of the ornaments on her hair were all missing. She was really in a sorry state. Ning Yishu looked at her with a gloomy gaze. His gaze swept past the faintly discernible trace of whiteness under the torn clothes. His breathing became a lot heavier, and he immediately looked away. Then he took off his coat and covered her body with it. If she wasn't so vicious, he wouldn't have to kill her. Ning Yishu hesitantly left, step by step a bit heavy. Suddenly, the terrifying sound of a beast sounded behind him. He hesitated for a moment, then fiercely clenched his fists. His eyes hardened, and he quickly left, leaving Wei Wei Bai as the guardian beast's meat. Chapter 367. After he left, Wei Wei Bai opened her eyes. She had just haggled with the system and spent another day of her life points. She had directly activated the labyrinth of illusions trap. Then she would use the entire labyrinth to create a huge illusion, and use the illusions in the illusion to fill up Wei Wei Bai's past. The name of the illusion was, Shocking, your master's tragic past is unknown to all. If you don't see it, you won't be a hero. System, the headlines of this rural fringe area are getting lower and lower. Ning Yishu resisted the urge to turn around and ran a little further away. He planned to sneak in and pick the blessed flower after the guardian beast was lured out. Suddenly, he stopped in his tracks. The surroundings were terrifyingly silent. Darkness spread out. He looked up and saw that the 6 eyes had disappeared. The sky had also disappeared. Ning Yishu immediately thought of the terrifying aspect of the labyrinth of illusions. This labyrinth would stimulate one's inner obsessions and then weave them into illusions, causing people to wander around. Regardless of whether it was something unbearable, something one longed for, or a happy experience, it could all be used as nourishment for illusions. He actually triggered the labyrinth's trap. Ning Yishu did not hesitate to use the dagger to cut the back of his hand. The blood was immediately absorbed by the dagger. The dagger emitted a faint red light, ominous and sinister. This dagger that he had accidentally obtained had the ability to break through illusions. The illusions suddenly disappeared, and a small flower with a purple and red circle appeared in front of him. Ning Yishu's pupils shrank. The blessed flower. He immediately reached out to pick it. Suddenly, the back of his hand was fiercely slapped, causing him to tremble. "You thief, why are you picking my flower?" A tender and clear child's voice rang out. Ning Yishu looked up in shock, but found that there was no sign of the blessed flower in front of him. Instead, there were some ordinary flowers. The girl standing in front of him was about 7 or 8 years old. She wore a green shirt and had her hair combed into 2 buns. She looked exquisite and cute. Her face had not fully matured yet, but one could see her beautiful appearance in the future. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he felt that her face was very similar. "You're home." Ning Yishu raised his head in confusion. In the end, he saw that the surroundings were actually pavilions and buildings of the human world. The girl said fiercely, "You stole my flowers. You're a thief. I'm going to throw you into the pond." Ning Yishu. "Damn brat, I thought she was cute, but she's actually so vicious. This character. This appearance. Why did it feel so familiar?" Before Ning Yishu could think further, the girl suddenly ran out. "Catch the thief, catch the thief." Ning Yishu hurriedly followed him. "I'm not a thief. You're mistaken." The girl ran to the front of the main house and suddenly stopped. As for Ning Yishu, who had followed after him, his footsteps also stiffened. Blood flowed out of the door, and there were mountains of corpses inside. "It's this family. There's a child with a single water spirit root. Kill this family and take the child away. It can be considered as cutting off her mortal ties." Inside the door, someone said coldly. But the girls suddenly screamed, "Father, Mother." Ning Yishu already knew what had happened. When he was cultivating, he had heard that some sects would kill the child's family to fight over a talented child. That way, the child would have no one to rely on and could only rely on the cultivation sections. What a cruel and terrifying method. Ning Yishu hurriedly said, "Don't go in." But it was too late. A hand lifted the girl's collar. "Found it. It's this child. Go back." The girl screamed, "Let go of me. Who are you? Let go of me." Ning Yishu didn't know where the impulse came from, but he actually rushed over. Let go of her. In the end, his fingers pierced through those people's bodies. Ning Yishu looked at his hand strangely. Karma. Chapter 368. Suddenly, he raised his head and found himself in a familiar place. Grand Heaven's Mountains Punishment Room. This place was eerie and terrifying, filled with the smell of blood. He had been here a few times, and every time, he was tortured to the point of wishing he was dead. This made him hate Wei Wei by even more. He was clearly in the secret realm, but in the blink of an eye, he was here. This was an illusion. Although he used the dagger to break open the secret realm in time, it was too late. However, he was very clear that he was sober, and the illusion could not use a sober person as nourishment to weave an illusion. Then, this illusion, whose desires were weaved from the depths of his heart. Without waiting for him to understand, an ice-cold whip suddenly lashed out from the side. Whoosh! The smell of blood filled the air. An incomparably weak and hoarse scream rang out. Ning Yishu looked to the side and saw the girl lying on the ground, covered in blood. She curled up in pain and helplessness. But she could not stop those terrifying whips. Grand Heaven's mountain sect, we must sever our hearts and emotions. We must cut off the mortal world, and cannot be attached to the filthy fetters of the mortal world. The girl fiercely raised her head, and her blood-stained face had a vicious resentment. You killed my parents. If you have the guts, beat me to death. Otherwise, I will take revenge in the future. Just as she finished speaking, the whip lashed out again. Ning Yishu knew that this whip was soaked in mana, and when it hit people, it was so painful that they wished they were dead. He had been hit before, and even someone as tolerant as him could only beg for mercy. But the girl hugged her head, crying and cursing at the same time, I will not let you go. In the future, I will make sure you all die without a complete corpse. This vicious strength, this cold-blooded wolf cub. But for no reason, there was an extremely heart-wrenching feeling on her body. Ning Yishu thought back to when he was being whipped, he was not as resistant as her. She looked to be only 7 or 8 years old. Ning Yishu clearly knew that this was an illusion, but he could not help but reach out and pull her. He wanted to pull her out of this hell. Just as his fingers touched her, she suddenly raised her head, her eyes shining terrifyingly. Who are you? She was suspicious and cautious, and her body couldn't help but curl up. This was an instinctive posture to prevent others from harming her. It was clearly an illusion, but she could see him all the time. Ning Yishu didn't think too much about it. He suddenly reached out, grabbed her, and ran out. Rather than saying that he was saving her, it was more like he was saving himself. She reminded him of the scene of him being whipped. At that time, he had also thought hopelessly that if only someone could save him. After picking her up, he ran out of the door and rushed to a remote place on the mountaintop in the blink of an eye. He found a cave in this place that no one knew about. There was a small spirit spring in the cave that could heal wounds. When he was injured, he often used this spirit spring to heal himself. The girl stared at him with a cold expression, but her eyes were filled with fear. Ning Yishu couldn't help but comfort her, I'm here to save you. The girl frowned in disbelief. He placed her in the spiritual spring, and the water soaked her wound. She couldn't help but scrunch up her face in pain. Ning Yishu suddenly held her hand. The familiar feeling in his heart made him want to treat her better. She looked up in shock, but didn't pull back her hand. The healing of the wound was too painful, so to alleviate her pain, she dug her nails into his palm. Ning Yishu sucked in a breath. Although he knew that it was an illusion, he still felt pain. This little white-eyed wolf, he saved her, but she still treated him like this. She suddenly held his hand and pressed it into the spirit spring. The wound healed. Chapter 369. She proudly looked up and her smile became sly. All right, you're injured, so I'll heal you. We don't owe each other anything. Was this considered repaying a debt? What a sly little fox. Ning Yishu couldn't help but laugh. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 10. After he finished laughing, the scene changed again. It turned into a firewood shed. He knew this place. He was once punished by being locked up here for 10 days without eating. Because he couldn't cultivate, he didn't eat and almost starved to death. He was a bit anxious. He looked around and saw a familiar person curled up in the corner of the firewood shed. She didn't feel safe and hugged her knees, burying her head in them and shivering from the cold. He gently walked over and reached out to touch her, only to find that she had already fainted and was running a high fever. Ning Yishu hesitated a bit before picking her up again. No one could see him in this illusion. The empty grand heavens mountain. The silent buildings of a ghost town. He was also panicked by being alone, but when he held her in his arms, he found that it wasn't that bad. Not to mention, her experience was too similar to his. Whipped, locked up, all alone. When Ning Yishu saw her, it was as if he saw himself. He carried her back to his little broken house and took out some common medicine used in the human world. He bandaged the wounds on her body that hadn't healed yet. Then he used cold water to cool her down. She suddenly opened her eyes. Who is it? She was like an injured cub, ready to jump up and bite at any moment. Ning Yishu softly said, "It's me." She finally saw him clearly and the vigilance on her face relaxed. "Oh, it's you." Ning Yishu saw her pale little face and couldn't help saying, "Are you feeling better?" She nodded and suddenly frowned. "Why did you save me?" Ning Yishu was stunned. Actually, he didn't know why he saved her. Clearly, his heart had long been hardened by the coldness of reality. But when he saw her, his heart couldn't help softening. Maybe it's because you're very similar to me. People who were injured would always want to hug another injured person to keep warm. When she heard this, she became unhappy. "You're so old, how can you look like me? Besides, I'm much prettier than you." After saying that, she looked at his handsome face with jealousy and then turned her face away in a fit of pique. She was still a little girl. Ning Yishu was not angry, he just thought it was funny, and the way she shrunk into a ball was also very cute. He reached out and gently patted her head. "Yes, you're the most beautiful." She turned her back to him and snorted coldly, as if she disdained his compliment. But he saw the side of her face blushing. She was shy. He was just a child. Ning Yishu's heart softened and he couldn't help but smile. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 12. This is a tortoise-like speed increase. Suddenly, she heard Ning Yishu say, "I know you're not reconciled and want to take revenge, but you're too weak, so you need to disguise yourself when necessary." Her ears twitched and she turned around, fiercely saying, "I knew you were sent by them. Don't think that I'll forget my parents. I won't cultivate, so I won't let you succeed." Ning Yishu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, he didn't think that she would think this way. But when he thought about how she saw her family die tragically and suffered so much torture, he also knew where her vigilance came from. He couldn't help but want to teach her. You can't take revenge like this, you don't have the strength, so you need to cultivate. Wait until you're stronger than anyone else, then you can do what you want. Transmigration system, male god, come here, transmigration system, male god, come here / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 370. She frowned as if she didn't quite understand and thought for a moment. Is it okay to become stronger? Ning Yishu nodded and couldn't help but soften his voice. That's right. If you become stronger, no one can bully you. This was the truth that he had learned since he was a child. In this world, the strong preyed on the weak. If you don't want to be beaten, you can only be the one to beat others. She suddenly waved her hand. Hey, come here. Ning Yishu leaned over and gave her a light kiss on the lips. He was startled and reached out to touch his mouth. She frowned and coldly snorted, "You're lucky. This is my first kiss. Consider it as a gift for saving me. I won't owe you anything in the future." After saying this, she turned around and couldn't help but complain to herself, "This is really lucky for you. You're so old and you're so average looking. No woman will like you." Ning Yishu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This could also be considered a gift in return. Moreover, she was still a child. What was in her head all day? But his heart softened. That faint sweetness was like drinking honey. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 15. After Ning Yishu finished laughing, he found that the scene had changed. The sound of a bell rang, and a snow-white, delicate foot suddenly appeared under his chin, lifting his face. Ning Yishu's first sight was the anklet on her ankle. The small green bell on the anklet contrasted with her snow-white skin. Then there was her already grown face. Her eyes were like water and her eyebrows were flirtatious. She raised her eyebrows and said in a sweet voice, "Idiot, where did you run off to? I couldn't find you." She sat on the railing, her black hair flying and her long skirt floating. Ning Yishu stared blankly at her young and delicate face, but it was incomparably familiar. His heart skipped a few beats as a bitter and astringent feeling surged up. She looked to be 13 or 14 years old. Her youth was just right, so beautiful that it was full of vitality. Seeing him in a daze, she couldn't help but pout. She coldly snorted and said, "Seeing that you still look like an ordinary person, you must be very weak. I'm already at the foundation establishment stage." Ning Yishu didn't dare to look at her. He hesitated for a moment before saying, "You're cultivating very quickly." When she heard this, she pursed her red lips and smiled. "Of course, I am the person who has cultivated the fastest in the past 1,000 years in Grand Heaven's Mountain." Ning Yishu really wanted to run away. He already knew whose illusionary realm he was in. He was extremely clear-headed, so the illusion could not use him. He could only use someone else to create an illusion, and that person who was trapped in the illusion and kept wandering around. "Hey!" A delicate and dissatisfied voice rang out. Just as Ning Yishu raised his head, she flicked his forehead with her finger. "Is he really stupid?" Ning Yishu looked up at her, his eyes flashing with complicated emotions. She suddenly lifted her foot. "Help me put on my shoes, dummy." She still had that arrogant and willful appearance. She had never been kind since she was young. Ning Yishu knew whose past this was. He knew that he would definitely be able to walk out of this illusion. Because this was not his illusion, and the only person that could be trapped in the labyrinth of illusions was her. Ning Yishu took 2 steps back and looked at her deeply. As long as he took a few more steps back and used his dagger to break out of the illusion, he would be able to leave. In reality, he still had to pick the blushed flower. He shouldn't waste time playing with her here. She suddenly lifted her foot, and the crisp sound of the bell made her tilt her head in confusion. "Are you stupid, or do you not even know how to put on your shoes?" Even in her own illusion, she liked to bully others so much. Ning Yishu was angry. He reached out and grabbed her ankle, pulling hard. Chapter 371. She was shocked and forgot that she was a foundation establishment cultivator. She was pulled down from the railing by him and fell into his arms. In reality, he wouldn't dare to treat her like this. Because this was an illusion, his strength was actually greater than hers. She was also shocked. "Aren't you an ordinary person?" Ning Yishu knew why he could hold her hostage. It was because her body in reality was extremely weak and her mind was entangled in the illusion. And he was awake, so in the illusion, he was the stronger one. Ning Yishu didn't answer. He put her on the ground, then bent down and put on a pair of embroidered shoes for her. She laughed softly. She seemed to be very proud of him for being obedient. This woman, why didn't she change? Selfish and thick-skinned. Shouldn't women be more reserved? She let a man wash her feet and put on her shoes every day. Did she not have any sense of shame? Ning Yishu thought angrily. After putting on the shoes, she suddenly turned around and laid on his back. Hey, carry me. I'm tired. Ning Yishu. She's asking for a yard after giving him an inch. He thought that she was also like this in reality. She would mock and ridicule people for no reason and would ask for someone to carry her. Why was she so delicate? Suddenly, she reached out and pulled his ear. You're deaf. Carry me. She was only in her teens, but she was so casually seducing people. Ning Yishu's ears turned red. He immediately carried her and walked forward. A fragrant wind blew. Her body was filled with a fragrance. It was rich and smelled especially good. Hey, what's your name? He pursed his lips and was silent for a while before answering, Ning. She teased, it sounds like a girl's name. My name is Wei Wei Bai. Do you remember it? He looked at her face and knew that she was Wei Wei Bai. Besides being a little younger, they were exactly the same. Even their infuriating personalities were the same. Wei Wei Bai blew a breath into his ear, you have to remember my name. I will become the strongest cultivator in the future and do whatever I want. Ning Yishu's ears turned even redder as he hurriedly changed the topic. You're not taking revenge anymore. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before she sneered, revenge is a must. I have to skin them, cut off their flesh, hang them up, and whip their corpses to relieve the hatred in my heart. Ning Yishu sighed. No matter how he looked at her, he didn't like her at all. Oh, that's right. You look especially weak. When I reach the nascent soul stage in the future and control the grand heavens mountain range, I will take you in as my disciple. Ning Yishu stopped in his tracks and smiled bitterly. She had indeed accepted him as her disciple. Unfortunately, she didn't seem to like this disciple of his. Wei Wei Bai lowered her status and said, I'll give you the position of head disciple. You should thank me. Ning Yishu thought to himself, being your disciple is really my bad luck of 8 lifetimes. He thought of the days when he was abused by her, whipped, locked up, starved, and even mocked and ridiculed. She seemed to have experienced all of this before. When she was weaving illusions, she would use the deepest obsessions in her heart as nourishment. Thus, when her family was exterminated when she was young and she was beaten and abused, it was her deepest memory. Thinking of this, Ning Yishu's heart ached for some reason. The loathing in his heart unknowingly decreased a bit. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 20. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. She jumped down from his body and pushed him into the door at the side, closing the door behind him. Don't come out. Ning Yishu stood inside the door and looked outside through the crack of the door. Wei Wei Bai respectfully lowered her head. Master. A man whose face couldn't be seen clearly said coldly, what level of water spirit scripture have you cultivated to? Chapter 372. Wei Wei Bai smiled and said in a sweet voice, Master, I've cultivated to the 5th layer. Master said, it's only the 5th layer. Are you slacking off? Wei Wei Bai said, I'm not, Master. Master snorted coldly and suddenly threw out a burst of spiritual power to whip her. It's only the 5th layer. You're a genius with a single spiritual root, and you don't even have a bottleneck when it comes to the core formation realm. What I want isn't an ordinary cultivation speed, I want to be 100 times faster than other people, understand? While speaking, that faceless man continued to whip her. Wei Wei Bai weakly lay on the ground and said cowardly, I'll cultivate to the 6th layer as soon as possible. However, her eyes were cold and ruthless, as if her heart was hiding an unreconciled hatred. Ning Yishu, who was standing inside the door, actually felt a throbbing pain in his heart. What kind of place was Grand Heaven's Mountain? Her viciousness was nurtured bit by bit like this. It was just like raising goo. It turned out that her later methods of torturing people were all derived from this. Ning Yishu suddenly couldn't help but rush out. That faceless man was gone, and she was the only one curled up on the ground. He suddenly didn't dare to touch her, as if she would disappear as soon as he touched her. Wei Wei Bai suddenly raised her head and looked at him coldly. Are you mocking me? Ning Yishu's mouth was a bit dry. Why would I mock you? Wei Wei Bai sneered. I'm a person who's willing to lower myself and can only crawl under the enemy who destroyed my sect and wag my tail to beg for mercy. Isn't that really disgusting? Ning Yishu's heart shook, and his eyes began to sting. You're just protecting yourself. He was the same. Under her torture, he clearly hated her, but he still endured and lowered himself. Wasn't that also protecting himself? They were so similar. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 25. When Wei Wei Bai heard his words, she couldn't help but feel wronged. Her eyes were watery, but her mouth stubbornly spat out ruthless words, that old fart, no, the entire Grand Heaven's mountain range, I will trample them all under my feet sooner or later. I want those who disobey me to die a horrible death. Such vicious words. Yet he made it sound so pitiful and tragic. Ning Yishu found himself unable to hate her. So much so that his heart started to ache. He couldn't help but crouch down and reach out to hold her in his arms. You will. In the future, you will trample the entire Grand Heaven's mountain under your feet. Yes, in the future, she would become a nascent soul cultivator. Everyone could only look up to her. No matter where she went, she was a peerless beauty. No one dared to bully her. When Wei Wei Bai heard his words, she suddenly trembled all over. She buried her face in his arms, unwilling to let him see her crying side. I will be very powerful. She was like a child who had encountered a calamity. She grabbed onto a life-saving straw and desperately tried to hypnotize herself that she could be saved. Ning Yishu didn't know why, but his nose began to ache. You are very powerful. He clearly hated her so much. He also knew that her nature was vicious and ruthless. However, at this moment, when he hugged her painful and restless body, he didn't have a single trace of resentment. Suddenly, she disappeared from his arms. Ning Yishu was shocked. As if he had lost something important, he looked around. The voices of a bunch of faceless people came from the side. Senior Marshal Sister has broken through. She succeeded in building her foundation at 14 and formed her gold core at 50. She's simply a genius. Yes, Master is very happy. Of course she's happy. Although Master is a nascent soul cultivator, her time is up. Now, Senior Marshal Brother Chiu Bai and Senior Marshal Sister Wei Wei have both formed their gold cores. Our Grand Heaven's Mountain has a successor. Chiu Bai, Ning Yishu frowned and walked past those faceless people. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. All the dim colors were glowing with vitality. She walked over from the end of the corridor. She was wearing a light blue chiffon dress. Her skin was like cream, and her long hair hung down to her waist. With every step she took, he heard the tinkling of bells. Chapter 373. This was the adult Wei Wei Bai. She suddenly quickened her steps and arrived in front of him. Ning, where did you go? Long time no see. Her fragrance wafted into his nose. Ning Yishu smelled the familiar fragrance and saw her familiar face. It completely overlapped with the real her. But the real her wouldn't have such a friendly attitude. Wei Wei Bai suddenly raised her brows. I said you were a normal person, but after so many years, you still don't look old. Ning Yishu's heart skipped a beat. Was she starting to suspect something? Once she started to suspect something was wrong, the illusion would be shaken. Then, they would be able to break out of the illusion. No, he should have left long ago. This illusion wasn't his, so in theory, it couldn't trap him. But he still couldn't leave. Why do you look so bitter? Do you feel bad when you see me? Bai Weiwei poked his forehead with a finger and said unhappily. If she was unhappy, no one else would be happy. Suddenly, a male voice interrupted. Junior sister, why aren't you agreeing to my proposal? Weiwei Bai's face darkened and a trace of disgust flashed in her eyes. She stood in front of Ning Yishu, carelessly brushing back her hair. I practice the water spirit scripture, so I need to protect my primordial yin. In this life, it's impossible for me to dual cultivate with someone. Qiu Bai was wearing a white robe and looked handsome and gentle. Junior sister, how can you say that? We can just communicate mentally and not physically. Spiritual intercourse was a deeper form of union than physical union. Weiwei Bai scoffed. No need, I don't want to marry you. Qiu Bai's face sank. Oh, junior sister, are you looking down on me? Weiwei Bai was annoyed. No, I think you're ugly. After speaking, she turned around and pulled Ning Yishu forward. Ning Yishu turned around and saw Qiu Bai's vicious face. If it were him, he would not make enemies for himself so directly unless he could kill the enemy in one hit. She was too vicious, but not smart enough. Suddenly, Weiwei Bai turned around. No one can see you. Ning Yishu's heart tightened. Was she finally beginning to suspect something? In the end, a hint of sadness suddenly appeared on her face. Am I too lonely? Is that why I imagined someone to accompany me? Ning Yishu took a step forward. He couldn't help but want to get closer to her. He wanted to tell her that he was real. But he couldn't bring himself to say it. Because they were all fake. She fell into the illusion of her past memories and couldn't get out. And he was also trapped here. Weiwei Bai did not want his answer. Forget it. Anyway, when I am strong enough, you will disappear. The strongest won't be lonely. After speaking, she shook off his hand and left. Ning Yishu's fingers were empty and his heart was also empty. He saw her clothes flutter as she turned around without hesitation. He didn't know where this impulse came from. He suddenly rushed over. Reaching out, he grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his embrace with too much force. Her hair fluttered and there was a trace of shock on her face. Ning Yishu opened his arms and hugged her tightly. He could feel the softness and fragrance in his hands. No, I really exist. He didn't know why he emphasized this. Weiwei Bai froze and let him hug her. Ning Yishu didn't know where he got the courage, but he suddenly lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. The doubts and surging impulses in his heart broke through the walls of his rationality and poured out into passion. He finally knew why he couldn't get out. She was trapped by her past. And he was trapped by her. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 30. Transmigration system, male god, come here, transmigration system, male god, come here, /transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here, /. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 374. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, you can come to Sashu. Calm on Baidu to find the S. Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She suddenly pushed him away and turned around to run. Halfway through, she felt that her reaction was too cowardly. She immediately turned around and formed a water sleeve with her hand, sending Ning Yishu flying. Ning Yishu didn't feel any pain, but he was still sent flying to the ground. Wei Wei Bai angrily said, "Next time you dare to do this to me, I'll kill you." Her words were hurried and fierce, but her face turned red. It didn't seem like she was angry, but rather shy. After she finished cursing, she turned around and flew out, disappearing in front of him. Ning Yishu lay on the ground. In the past, whenever he was whipped by Wei Wei Bai, he would remember it in his heart. Then he would think about how to get back at her in the future. But now, all the hatred in his heart had vanished into thin air. Thinking of her angry and shy appearance, Ning Yishu couldn't help but laugh in a low voice. So his master also had such a cute side to her. So cute that his heart was about to melt. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 35. Suddenly, the surroundings darkened. Ning Yishu knit his brows. The scene in this illusion kept changing. Wei Wei Bai had also grown up. Were these the memories that left the deepest impression on her? Then, he heard a sinister laugh. "Gg, my disciple, come to your master's side." When Ning Yishu heard these malicious words, he felt a layer of goosebumps appear on his skin. Wei Wei Bai's weak voice sounded. "What kind of array is this, master?" That faceless master appeared again. This time it could be seen that he was already old. "My time is almost up. I thought that I wouldn't be able to hold on, but I met you. My good disciple, your water spirit scripture has already reached the 10th layer and your body has completely matured." Ning Yishu finally saw a giant array appear under Wei Wei Bai's body. The formation was complex and unknown, and a white mist-like light flowed around it. She lay powerlessly on the array, her forehead covered in cold sweat. Her master walked to her side, stretched out his wrinkled hand, and gently stroked her hair. When Ning Yishu saw this, he couldn't help but become angry. He wanted to rush over, but found that he couldn't move, and couldn't even make a sound. "I've waited for too long. Although you're a woman, I can't find a more suitable body for me." Fear flashed across Wei Wei Bai's face. "You want to possess my body?" His master grinned. "That's right, my good disciple. Give me your body." Wei Wei Bai's face was covered in cold sweat. Her body trembled, and she was in so much pain that she began to convulse. Perhaps it was her despair that made her too lazy to pretend. She looked up, and the resentment in her eyes surged out. "Old fart, I would rather self-destruct than give you my body." His master sneered, "Do you think you can self-destruct? I've been waiting for this day for so long, how could I let you self-destruct? How could I not know about the hatred in your heart? Why do you think I've always allowed you to grow? I only want your body, not your brain." Wei Wei Bai desperately tried to mobilize her spiritual energy, but in the end, her body was empty. The huge formation emitted a white halo, suppressing all of her struggles. That faceless master approached her step by step. He held a strange magic tool in his hand, and kept absorbing the surrounding spiritual energy. Her master laughed out loud. "My good disciple, give me your body." After saying that, he threw the magic tool in his hand above her head. A cold light rushed out from the magic tool, enveloping Wei Wei Bai below. Chapter 375. Wei Wei Bai suddenly let out a pitiful cry. Her fingers powerlessly dug into the ground. Because she used too much strength, her nails turned and blood seeped out from her fingertips. Ning Yishu heard her pitiful cry and his face turned pale. He desperately tried to approach her, but he couldn't. This illusion seemed to be the most terrifying memory in her heart. So she fell too deep and couldn't break free. She also repelled him, an outsider, from approaching her. Ning Yishu saw her body's spiritual energy being sucked away by someone. He saw that faceless person reach out with his incomparably ugly hand to touch her. An incomparably crazy anger suddenly surged in his heart. A golden power began to flow through his body. Ning Yishu found that he could move. Although his movements were incomparably slow, the illusion's power couldn't bind him. His heart didn't feel pleasantly surprised, only full of rage. He would rather see her living viciously and in high spirits than see her being tortured like this. At this moment, Ning Yishu found that there was an impulse in his heart. He wanted to kill anyone who dared to make her feel so helpless and in pain. The golden spiritual energy broke through the barrier. The words that Ning Yishu wanted to say in his throat finally roared out, "Master." He broke through the illusion's barrier and quickly appeared in front of her. At this moment, he was like an omnipotent expert in her dream. He used his bare hands to crush the artifact that was absorbing her spiritual energy. Then he turned around and smashed the faceless person's body with a punch. The faceless person let out a pitiful cry. A small person emitting a white light ran out of the faceless person's body. Wei Bai suddenly raised her head and stretched out her hand to create a sleeve of spiritual energy. It wrapped around the small nascent soul that escaped. This was the soul of a nascent soul cultivator. Ning Yishu wanted to take the first step and kill the soul that escaped. In the end, Wei Bai's voice was hoarse and her eyes were filled with tears. She resentfully said, "I want to kill him with my own hands." Ning Yishu's movement stiffened. This was indeed her personality. She had endured and hated for so long. Killing her enemies with her own hands and torturing them to death was something she would do. Wei Bai exerted her strength and tore apart the nascent soul cultivator's soul bit by bit. The entire room was filled with incomparably shrill screams. She used the most painful and cruel method to kill her master. In the past, when he saw her torturing others, he hated her cruel methods. But now, Wei Bai's face was deathly pale. Her brows were furrowed, and her long hair was drenched in cold sweat. She looked exceptionally pitiful. Ning Yishu's heart ached, and he couldn't suppress his heartache. He approached her step by step. Suddenly, she raised her head and glared at him fiercely. She swung the water sleeve in her hand and slapped him heavily to the ground. Ning Yishu let out a muffled groan. It was actually so painful in this illusion. She really wanted to kill him. Wei Bai struggled to stand up and hit Ning Yishu with her sleeves. It was as if there was a deep hatred between them. Every time he whipped him, he would use all his strength, as if he wanted nothing more than to kill him. Just as Ning Yishu was about to resist, he heard her sobbing voice. "What are you doing here? Are you here to see me make a fool of myself? See how I'm being trampled on like a piece of trash, without any ability to resist. Why don't you laugh? You should laugh when you see me like this." As she spoke, she continued to beat him to death. In any case, it was impossible to kill the main character in an illusion. Therefore, Wei Bai took advantage of her position to avenge her personal grudge and took a few more hits to vent her anger. Crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www. Sashu.com. Download Transmigration system, Adonis, come here and read this on your phone. https://m. Sashu.com. Chapter 376. You can search Transmigration system, male god, you can come to Sashu. Come on Baidu to find the. How could 5 days of life be that easy to earn? The host was making up her own desolate past, so it had to be responsible for uploading this nonsense to the host and creating this giant illusion. System, motherfucker, it feels like its host is even better at fabricating nonsense than a novel writer. What kind of nonsense is this? Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 40. The system was shocked. Was the male lead feeling pleasure from being whipped? How could his favorability increase like this? Ning Yishu was being whipped by her, but there was no resentment in his eyes. He waited for her to vent her anger before suddenly reaching out to grab her sleeve. In the illusion, he was stronger than her. So with a tug, he pulled her into his embrace. Wei Wei Bai fell into his embrace, but before she could look up, he had already reached out to hold her. His hand pressed down on her head, burying her in his shoulder like he was comforting a child. Don't be afraid, Wei Wei. This was the first time he called her name, but also the first time he wanted to forget that they were master and disciple. He ignored her desperate struggle and reached out to pat her back. Don't be afraid, I'm here. Only people who had experienced despair would know this kind of pain. The more intense her reaction was, the more it proved that she was afraid. Ning Yishu was not willing to let go of her, so she couldn't hit him. She could only use her nails to scratch at his arm until it bled. She bitterly said, "Let go of me, let go of me." Ning Yishu felt the pain, but he was not willing to let go. He was still trying to comfort her, trying to calm her down. Wei Wei Bai's fingers fiercely pinched, digging out more blood from the broken skin on his arm. Truly, a cruel woman. Ning Yishu gave a bitter smile, but he could only accept his fate and help her vent her anger. She suddenly stopped struggling and the strength that was pinching his arm also disappeared. Ning Yishu's hand that was patting her back also stopped. He felt a moist sensation on his shoulder and the side of his neck. She was crying. Wei Wei Bai silently rested her head on his shoulder. She didn't make a sound as she gritted her teeth and tried her best not to cry. Those tears kept falling onto his skin, as if they could smash a person's heart into pieces. Ning Yishu had a bunch of words stuck in his throat. He forced himself to speak a few times before softly saying, in the future, no one will bully you anymore. You have taken your revenge. In the entire Grand Heavens Mountain, only you are the most powerful. Bai Weiwei didn't say anything. In the future, you can hit and bully whoever you want. You can kick away whoever you don't like. He didn't care about anything else. He just wanted her to stop crying. Those words that he would never have said before, now came out one sentence after another. As long as she was happy, murder and arson did not matter. Ning Yishu racked his brains, coaxing her word by word. After an unknown amount of time, she finally felt tired and stopped her stifled cries. Ning Yishu heaved a sigh of relief. She suddenly said in a dissatisfied tone, "Why didn't you appear earlier?" Ning Yishu quickly said, "I'll definitely come earlier to save you next time." Wei Wei Bai kicked him away and said in a delicate voice, "Who wants you to save me? Who do you think you are?" Ning Yishu helplessly looked at her. She really had a spoiled personality. He thought back to when he first entered the dreamscape. At such a young age, she already knew how to throw people she didn't like into the water and drown them. Sure enough, her personality was naturally not likable. Wei Wei Bai suddenly turned her face away and raised her foot. She awkwardly said, "I dropped my shoes." Ning Yishu saw her shoes and hurriedly went to pick them up and put them on for her. Chapter 377. After dressing up, she immediately stood up and walked out. Ning Yishu immediately followed. Wei Wei Bai opened the door and the bright morning light poured in, dispelling all of the darkness. She stood in the morning light and looked back with a smile. It was indescribably beautiful. Idiot, you have to come find me earlier next time. Ning Yishu's heart sped up and he couldn't help but smile. Ding, the male lead's affection has increased to 45. Suddenly, the scene in front of him disappeared. Ning Yishu saw himself standing beside the spirit spring. This was the place he had brought her to heal. When he saw the person in the spring, his pupils couldn't help shrinking. Wei Wei Bai was lying at the edge of the spring. Her bare back and snow-white skin were covered in crisscrossing scars. How did this happen? After killing her master, wasn't there no one who could bully her? Could it be Chiu Bai? She suddenly opened her eyes and cautiously said, "Who is it?" After saying this, she finally saw the person in front of her. "It's you." She let out a sigh of relief. Ning Yishu looked at the scars on her body and his eyes were cold. Who did this? Wei Wei Bai casually looked at him and then suddenly smiled. Who dares to hurt me? I am at the nascent soul stage right now. Grand Heaven's Mountain only has 2 nascent soul stage cultivators. Even that ugly senior brother of mine doesn't dare to bully me. Ning Yishu lowered his eyes and reached out to touch her back. He could feel the scars on her back. Although they had started to fade after soaking in the spirit spring, he could still see how terrifying and painful it was when she was injured. Wei Wei Bai said without care, "These are the scars from the lightning tribulation when I was breaking into the nascent soul stage. Compared to forming a nascent soul and passing the lightning tribulation, these scars are nothing." She was good at calculating benefits and valued gains and losses. So when she successfully passed the lightning tribulation, she was so happy that she didn't care about her scars. Ning Yishu felt a bitter taste in his mouth. You broke through to the nascent soul stage. He didn't know how many years it would take him to change the setting. And she was getting closer and closer to the age of reality. He didn't know that in a few years she would accept him as her disciple. Ning Yishu suddenly caught a whiff of a familiar fragrance as the woman approached him. He looked up in shock and saw her looking up. Her bright eyes were calculating, and her lips were almost touching the corner of his mouth. I say, Ning, where did you come from? Bai Weiwei's lips curled into a smile. Her face was flushed, sweet and beautiful. All these years, you've been by my side like a ghost, but I couldn't see through your cultivation. Ning Yishu felt bitter in his heart. He told the truth. I'm just an ordinary person. A piece of trash with a single spirit root who could not cultivate. Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows a little angrily. We're old friends, yet you still dare to lie to me. How can an ordinary person not age after so many years? Because this was an illusory realm. Ning Yishu clearly knew that this illusory realm would absorb people's spirit qi, but he still stayed here. The labyrinth of illusions was not a difficult trap to solve. As long as someone admitted it and realized that this was a fake world, they could break it. But he was unwilling to break it. Because he knew that once he broke it, he and her, one would still be the high and mighty Grand Heaven's Mountain's martial granduncle, while the other would be an ant at her feet. Reality was so cruel, which made this illusory realm even more attractive and beautiful. He always knew how to make a choice, and his heart had always been tenacious. But for this fake sweetness, he let himself fall into danger. Chapter 378. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were smiling as she softly said, Yo, I'm already at the nascent soul stage, yet I can't see through your cultivation. You're at least at the demigod stage, right? Since you're so powerful, why don't you become my Tao companion? Ning Yishu's heart suddenly started beating rapidly. Become Tao companions, his breathing was rapid, and his face was slightly red. But in the midst of his excitement, he saw a clear calculation in her eyes. She didn't deliberately pretend to be gentle because she liked him, but because she felt that he was a powerful immortal cultivator, so she planned to use him. "What do you want?" he asked softly. Wei Wei Bai's gentle smile disappeared, and she raised her eyebrows and sneered, "I want to kill my senior brother and monopolize Grand Heaven's mountain." As expected, this vicious character of hers didn't change at all. And she actually said that she wanted to use him so openly. She was simply stupid, yet cute. Ning Yishu felt that he couldn't be saved. Even after being tricked by her, he still thought that she was cute. Seeing him in a daze, Wei Wei Bai impatiently flicked his forehead. "Are you stupid? If you don't want to help me, then forget it. I'll find another man." This sentence directly triggered the floodgates of a man's anger. He fiercely grabbed her hand and pulled her into his embrace. She wasn't wearing any clothes, and the wounds on her body had faded a lot. Her delicate and beautiful skin could still be seen. Ning Yishu was originally going to be angry, but he found that another flame in his heart was burning even more fiercely. "Is it true that whoever is more powerful can be your guest?" Wei Wei Bai's eyes turned, and she was unrepentant. "That's right, the strong is the king. The man I want must be the strongest and the best." Ning Yishu's heart was incomparably cold. What if he's not strong enough? Wei Wei Bai was incomparably calm. "Throw him away. A man who isn't strong isn't a man in my eyes." Ning Yishu sneered. As expected, this kind of woman. What exactly did he see in her? He was not stupid, and his heart was not blind. Those feelings of pity, jealousy, and longing intertwined together to form a damned love. He suppressed his anger and closed his eyes. Suddenly, he felt her fingers gently glide across his jaw. This action was extremely provocative. Ning Yishu finally lost control of the crazy emotions that he had been suppressing. He opened his eyes coldly. "Are you so willing to ruin yourself?" Wei Wei Bai saw that he was being sarcastic. She couldn't stand being bullied, so she flung his hand away. "Who wants to coax you? If it weren't for the fact that you're stronger than me, I wouldn't be happy to see you." These words actually sounded a little like a girl's grievance. It didn't seem like he was scolding, but more like he was complaining. However, Ning Yishu was struck by her words. Her disdainful attitude completely overlapped with reality. It was like a knife, cutting his rationality into pieces. Was he stronger than her? She couldn't afford to lose her primordial yin because of the cultivation technique she practiced. So even if she became Tao companions with someone, she could only achieve her goal through spiritual intercourse. Ning Yishu suddenly jumped into the spirit spring. His eyes were red, and he pressed her against the side of the spirit spring. Wei Wei Bai thought he was joking. "Let go of me." "So what if you're strong?" In the illusion, even if she was a nascent soul, she couldn't escape his control. Because he was awake, compared to her in the illusion, his spiritual power was much stronger. Ning Yishu suddenly lowered his head and kissed her back. The wet tip of his tongue licked her skin, as if he was licking the most beautiful dessert in the world. Chapter 379. Wei Wei Bai felt her blood run cold. She couldn't make up a story anymore. She fiercely knocked on the system. "I think it's time for the illusion to end." The system was lying on the keyboard, weakly saying, "My fingers are useless, I can't write the ending, wait for me to recover." Ning Yishu's movements were extremely fast. He had already stripped off his clothes. The two of them were pressed together. Wei Wei Bai's face paled. "What are you doing?" Ning Yishu's eyes were malicious. "I promised you, I'll become your partner, but I don't want a spiritual relationship, I want a real." Halfway through his words, his arms wrapped around her even tighter. This posture was self-evident. Wei Wei Bai's expression changed. Scram, do you want to cause my cultivation to regress? The water spirit scripture could only be cultivated by pure women. Once she lost her primordial yin, she would directly fall to the foundation establishment stage. Moreover, it would be difficult for her to advance her cultivation in the future. It was fine if she didn't struggle, but once she did, he almost couldn't suppress his excitement. Ning Yishu endured this terrible torture. His lips moved to her neck, and he said coldly, one word at a time. See, you want to find someone stronger than you, but how can you be sure that if he destroys your cultivation, you can resist? She was so stupid that he couldn't watch it anymore. She didn't know how to hide when she was scheming. When Wei Wei Bai heard this, her whole body stiffened. Ning Yishu was so close, how could he not notice her trembling nervously? He hugged her, and suddenly smiled sorrowfully. Master, this call of a master had crushed all of his wishful and hopeless thoughts. Wei Wei Bai turned her head blankly, but saw Ning Yishu's eyes were red. He reached out and gently touched her face, then suddenly kissed her softly. Let's go back. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 50. When he started to realize the desire in his heart and his feelings for her, it wasn't that he hadn't hardened his heart and wanted to give up everything and let the two of them wander in this illusion. She wouldn't be able to escape. He had also trapped himself. Wasn't this another form of being together? Ning Yishu took out the dagger and slit his wrist, feeding the dagger with his blood. An unknown red light, mixed with a few strands of gold, broke through the boundary of the illusion. The illusion began to collapse. Wei Wei Bai still maintained that blank expression. Slowly, her body faded away. Ning Yishu used his dagger to destroy the illusion. He looked at the familiar spirit spring and the familiar grand heavens mountain disappearing bit by bit. He also saw the woman in his arms gradually become transparent. The illusory realm collapsed. Just as Ning Yishu broke out of the illusion, he found himself still standing in the same place of the labyrinth of illusions. He was in a trance and couldn't tell the difference between reality and illusion. Suddenly, the pain in his wrist pulled his mind back. This was the wound where he fed the dagger his blood. Ning Yishu heard a beast roar and suddenly remembered something. He had thrown Wei Wei Bai near the blessed flower and attracted the guardian beast. They had been in the illusion for so long, but only a short while had passed in reality. Ning Yishu suddenly turned his head. At this moment, he was facing the most difficult choice in his life. Should he give up on her or help himself? Ning Yishu knew from a young age that it was every man for himself. Once he set his sights on a goal, he would persevere to achieve it. His biggest dream was to cultivate and attain the Tao. Roar! A monster with a green face, sharp fangs, black fur, and two mouths appeared in the fog. It slowly approached by Wei Wei's direction. Chapter 380. Ning Yishu struggled to take 2 steps forward as his heart clenched. He suddenly turned around and saw the 2 legs of the disgusting monster with 2 mouths stretching out its long fingernails. Under the fingernails, there was a section of the flying immortal skirt stained with blood in the fog. Wei Wei Bai, Ning Yishu's mind went blank and the hesitation in his heart disappeared. At this moment, the most profound image flashed through his mind. It was actually the scene of her opening the door and smiling at him in the illusion. Idiot, next time, you better come find me earlier. Idiot, Ning Yishu abruptly turned around and ran forward with all his might without hesitation. The monster let out a delighted laugh as though it had seen delicious meat and was in a good mood. Its hand had just landed on Wei Wei Bai's body. A ray of red light mixed with gold pierced through the fog and its palm. The monster howled and roared. Ning Yishu attacked the monster and rolled to Wei Wei Bai's side. He raised his head and saw Wei Wei Bai lying quietly beside a rock. She looked battered and exhausted, and her body was covered in blood. For a moment, he could not tell if she was dead or alive. Suddenly, the guardian beast opened its mouth full of fangs and charged toward Wei Wei Bai. It knocked Ning Yishu aside and was about to bite her. Even if its hand was chopped off, it still wanted to eat a woman. Ning Yishu saw that she was about to be taken away by the guardian beast and desperately tried to snatch her back. However, it was too late. The guardian beast's movements were crafty. Its movements were so fast that no one could see it clearly. It bit Wei Wei Bai's clothes and was about to leave. He only had time to grab hold of the hem of her skirt. The hem of the skirt was fragile and was torn apart. Ning Yishu's eyes widened as he stared at the dress in his hands. She would die. I have to save her. Ning Yishu chased with all his might, but the guardian beast was about to disappear into the fog. For the first time, he felt fear and despair. He was going to lose her. Ning Yishu's mind shook as a strange power gushed out from his dantian. That vast and mighty power was so terrifying that it could shake the entire Scarlet Een Mountain mystic realm. The 6 giant eyes in the sky began to tear apart. A pure yang golden energy slowly shattered the entire mystic realm. First level of the refinement stage, second level, third level. Peak of the refinement stage. Golden spirit energy overflowed from his dantian. A huge vortex of spiritual energy formed above his head. Foundation establishment was complete. The system was putting on a facial mask to protect its face when it saw this scene. Everyone was dumbfounded. Ning Yishu had already lost all reason. A huge amount of spiritual energy was pouring into him, and he was on the verge of exploding. His meridians, flesh, and blood had been tempered countless times by spiritual energy. After the foundation establishment stage, it didn't stop. Instead, it continued to grow crazily. Rumble. Lightning tribulation was triggered. He began to form his core. The system silently flipped through the book. The male lead was supposed to form his gold core 2 years later. In the end, it hadn't even been 2 fucking minutes, and he had already formed his core. There was a word for it. Terrifying. The terrifying Ning Yishu found that his whole body was filled with power. He flew forward, so fast that he didn't even leave a shadow behind. Soon, he caught up with the guardian beast. With a bang, he shattered the guardian beast. Amidst the flesh and blood, he reached out and hugged the falling Wei Wei Bai. The fog dispersed, and the golden energy began to counterattack and nibble away at the mystic realm's power. The mystic realm, with tens of thousands of years of history, had absorbed the spirit energy of tens of thousands of cultivators, accumulating a terrifying power that couldn't be calculated. And this power was all absorbed by the special pure yang energy in Ning Yishu's body. Quick, comma. Chapter 381. The male lead of this novel was a super cheat who absorbed everything he saw. After absorbing the spiritual aura of the secret realm and completely digesting it, he would probably be able to reach the late nascent soul stage. The system silently covered its eyes. No, it refused to accept such a retarded and brainless long story. Damn, an ordinary male lead suddenly broke through the cultivation barrier in less than a few minutes and rushed to the core formation stage in a few minutes. He was about to break through to the nascent soul stage. What kind of power was this? The power of love. What happened to the big setting of not being able to cultivate as a virgin? It was eaten by a dog. Brainless author. Give 10,001 stars and scram to the course literature section. This wasn't a trick at all. People only wrote foundation establishment for 1 million words. Ning Yishu estimated that 10,000 words would break through the void and become an immortal. Ning Yishu easily passed the lightning tribulation and completed the core formation stage. His black hair grew to his calves, and his young body grew a lot taller, like a jade tree. He lowered his head, and his black eyes flowed with a golden light, with an aura of disdain for the world. Wei Wei Bai frowned, seeming to be a little uncomfortable, but she didn't wake up. Ning Yishu had read a lot of books and prepared for many years for cultivation. Now that he succeeded in forming his core, he vaguely knew that there was a very terrifying power in his body. If it was a normal time, he might be a little surprised. But now, his eyes were full of her bloody appearance. Ning Yishu tried to condense spiritual aura to treat her wound. The wound began to heal. Wei Wei Bai's tightly knitted brows slowly relaxed. Ning Yishu's brows also relaxed. He stared at her and said softly, "This time, I'm not late, right?" Idiot, he was indeed an idiot. He became an idiot for a woman. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 55. The secret realm began to collapse. The power accumulated for 10,000 years was almost all taken away by Ning Yishu. The system silently opened the side mission failure penalty form. Very good, the male lead's plot accelerated and rushed to the core formation stage. This was completely reasonable. There was no plot collapse. Therefore, neither its name nor Wei Wei Bai's name appeared on the punishment form. The system glanced at the label of the book, the unique and unhindered immortal Tao. Invincible feeling, just feeling good, awesome feeling good, routine brainless writing, I'm proud of being brainless. Does this mean that as long as the male lead is satisfied, the plot won't be considered a failure no matter how it collapses? Wei Wei Bai woke up in a daze and found herself being carried on someone's back. She rubbed her eyes and saw Ning Yishu's determined and calm side profile. Where are we? When Ning Yishu heard her voice, his body stiffened. Then he said, "We're out of the mystic realm, Master." However, there was a huge change in the secret realm. Everyone inside died and the secret realm collapsed. They had only been inside for a day. But because of the time distortion, 10 days had passed in the outside world. In the past 10 days, many people had tried to rescue the people in the secret realm, but all of them had failed. The outstanding disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain and Chiu Bai, who was a nascent soul cultivator, had all died. There were less than 10 people who had managed to escape. Wei Wei Bai snorted. It's good that they're dead. Some of those people from Grand Heaven's Mountain were Chiu Bai's disciples. This saves me the trouble of having to deal with them in the future. Ning Yishu didn't say anything. Instead, he slowly walked forward step by step. Wei Wei Bai's flying beast carriage followed behind. However, he wanted to carry her all the way down. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "Where are the things I asked you to take?" Ning Yishu immediately said, "I brought them with me. I'm waiting to give them to Master." Wei Wei Bai mocked, "Why are you giving them to me? They're all low-grade magic treasures and low-grade spirit stones. If you want them, take them. Don't throw them away." Ning Yishu, you were clearly the one who risked your life to take them in the mystic realm. Now you don't want them. A woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the ocean. Below to record this reading record. Chapter 382. Wei Wei Bai rested her head on his shoulder, a trace of doubt flashed in her eyes. How did we get out of the arcane realm? Ning Yishu was silent for a moment, a trace of dark light flashed in his eyes. We just happened to fall into the gap of the arcane realm, and then we came out. Wei Wei Bai said, "This must be because I'm in the nascent soul stage and have great luck, so I just happened to escape." Ning Yishu thought, you can believe this reason. Wei Wei Bai suddenly muttered to herself in doubt, I think I had a very long dream. Ning Yishu only felt that her words were like a feather, floating past his ears. He was a little nervous. Master, what did you dream of? Was it the same as him? She still remembered what happened in the fantasy realm. Wei Wei Bai had already thought about it. What happened in the fantasy realm was the turning point of her relationship with Ning Yishu. She remembered what happened in the fantasy realm, and then started to have a special affection for Ning Yishu. After all, vicious and cruel women also needed to fall in love, and once they fell in love, their affection would definitely increase. It was a perfect plan. Wei Wei Bai was about to open her mouth to say something. The system came out and interrupted, no, you're violating the character setting. Wei Wei Bai still had a beautiful expression on her face that said, I'm sure I can get more affection, ? The system said, most of the past information that you set for the character is to imitate the tragic experience of the male lead, completely arousing his pity. Wei Wei Bai still had a face of ? The system was helpless, so in his heart, you've already become a white lotus who does whatever she wants, kills, sets fires, and tortures others. It's not your fault, it's the world's fault. Wei Wei Bai thought, what kind of white lotus is killing and setting fires? A man-eating flower is more like it. Do you guys have some misunderstanding about the white lotus setting? The system said, your current persona needs to be vicious and vicious in the male lead's heart, and not a pitiful little cabbage. If you have the attitude of someone in love, it'll be fine. No matter how vicious you are, the male lead will find you especially cute, gentle, and kind. Wei Wei Bai, I'm already so vicious, but it's his own fault that he can't understand. Is that my fault? The system shamelessly admitted, that's right. If you don't take the blame, who will? In the end, the system said, you need to restore that vicious and ruthless image in the male lead's heart. Don't even think about dating for now. Wei Wei Bai, do you want her to carve the words vicious and vicious on her forehead and sprinkle some paint to make it more eye-catching? She weighed the pros and cons in her heart several times. Should she take the risk of breaking her character and speed up the pace of gaining favorability? She had still tortured Ning Yishu until he was beyond recognition. Whenever he saw her, he would think of the words vicious and vicious. Master. Ning Yishu noticed her puzzled silence and could not help but call out to her. Wei Wei Bai's face was bitter. She really did not dare to break her character. After all, the punishment of a family being struck by lightning was too scary. I had a dream. I dreamt that I was bitten by a wild beast, she said calmly. Ning Yishu's footsteps paused, and his eyes dimmed. We didn't meet any wild beasts, he said very calmly. He had completely erased his thoughts of killing her. Wei Wei Bai said tiredly, that's an inauspicious dream. Forget it, let's hurry back. Ning Yishu was silent for a while, then said, okay. Then he realized that Wei Wei Bai's breathing had become even and steady again. She had fallen asleep again. The labyrinth of illusions was a huge burden on her mind. Ning Yishu let the flying beast carriage run over, and then he got on the carriage. The carriage had been specially made, and was as big as a small room. Ning Yishu put her on the recliner, and then knelt beside her. Only now did he dare to reveal the affection in his eyes. Sure enough, he was the only one who remembered that illusion. Chapter 383. Ning Yishu reached out and gently stroked her face. After a long silence, he said, if I'm strong enough, does that mean I don't have to be your disciple, but can be your man? His fingers slowly touched her lips. Ning Yishu's eyes darkened. His fingers gently entered her lips and teeth. That moist touch made his body heat up. He endured this feeling. He pulled his hand back, then began to meditate and gather spirit energy. Core formation was not enough, nascent soul was not enough, but there were soul formation stage powerhouses. He wanted her to be able to live freely and arrogantly. She had a vicious personality, so she would offend many people in the future. If he was not strong enough, how could he protect her? Ning Yishu had a strong idea in his heart. He wanted to be strong enough that no one in the world could shake his position. Then, even if she overturned the sky, no one would be able to give her a hard time. This was the first time he cultivated so hard not for himself, but for someone else. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 60. The system was speechless. This increase in favorability is really magical. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, she saw a bright red HP bar above her head. The HP bar had decreased by half. Wei Wei Bai could not help but look around. Did she transmigrate again? This time it was a game world. In the end, wasn't this her own room in Grand Heaven's Mountain? The system reminded her, the HP bar is given to you for free. This HP bar is how much you crumble in the male lead's heart. Wei Wei Bai was shocked. I crumbled half of my image in his heart. The system said, yes, logically he knows that you are a vicious woman, but because of the increase in favorability, he subconsciously thinks that you are very cute when you pretend to be vicious. Anyway, when he sees you, he is very happy. What does this have to do with my image crumbling? Wei Wei Bai was desperate. Ning Yishu was unhappy when he saw her, so how could his favorability increase? But if his favorability increased, the system would determine that her image crumbled as soon as he was happy. This side quest was probably to kill her. The system replied, because in the original novel, the male lead would feel upset whenever he saw Wei Wei Bai. That's why when the system determines whether you're violating the character's setting, one of the conditions is whether you make him upset. Wei Wei Bai lay down weakly. Let lightning strike me to death. What kind of lousy mission is this? The system said, not only will the lightning strike you to death, but it will also strike you, your father, your sister, your ancestral grave, and the goldfish you raised. Wei Wei Bai said helplessly, it's one thing to kill you and your scumbag sister, but you want to kill my family too. It turned out that it and her scumbag sister held the same position in her heart. Ning Yishu's voice suddenly came from outside the door. Master. Wei Wei Bai shuddered. She glanced at the health bar above her head. Very good, it didn't collapse. She rearranged her expression and took out the expression pack that was specially made for evil female supporting characters. He raised his eyebrows and curled his lips, revealing a mocking sneer. Get in here. Ning Yishu walked in with a foot washing basin in his hands. Wei Wei Bai watched as he bent down and squatted by her feet with a respectful expression. Master, I heard that the moonlight flower at the top of the mountain has a calming effect, so I picked it for you to soak your feet. The moonlight flower withered very easily. It had to be picked within half a second when it bloomed, and then placed in a special box to preserve it. It took a lot of effort anyway. Wei Wei Bai showed an ungrateful and evil look. Then why aren't you taking off my shoes? Download the at https://m/sashu.com button at the bottom to record this chapter. Chapter 384. Ning Yishu immediately took off her shoes carefully and gently. The feet in the shoes were exquisite and cute. As he held them in his hands, his heart actually surged with a bit of restlessness. Then he put her feet in the water and gently rubbed them. Wei Wei Bai's expression suddenly changed. She lifted her feet and kicked him fiercely. Using such hot water, you're going to burn me to death. She used a lot of strength to kick him, so it was obvious that she was really dissatisfied. If Ning Yishu was an ordinary person, he would have probably suffered internal injuries from her kick. Master, I still have the moonlight flowers I picked. I'll get you another one right away. Wei Wei Bai snorted coldly. You're really a good-for-nothing. I don't know what else you can do. Come here. Ning Yishu raised his head and pressed a soft kiss on his lips. He suddenly froze. That special power went through his body and entered her body again. He wasn't an ordinary person now, so he could clearly feel how his power entered her body and how it repaired her meridians. It was as if the two of them had become one. Ning Yishu didn't have time to taste this kind of beauty before Wei Wei Bai pushed him away in disdain. Get lost. Don't be an eyesore. Ning Yishu stared deeply at her. His tone was still gentle and respectful. Yes, master. Wei Wei Bai suddenly frowned and squeezed his hand. You built your foundation. Ning Yishu pursed his lips. In fact, he had already formed his gold core and could have easily broken through to the nascent soul realm. This kind of cultivation speed was too shocking, so he didn't dare to show it. Plus, with the special power, he could actually hide his cultivation level. Therefore, he suppressed his cultivation level to the foundation building realm. Yes, master. Because the spiritual aura in the secret realm was abundant, I directly built my foundation. If Wei Wei Bai was a good master, she would definitely be overjoyed. Her disciple was simply a genius. From an ordinary person in the Hotian realm, she directly skipped the aura refining realm and rushed to the foundation building realm like a god. She simply broke the Guinness World Record in the cultivation world. But was Wei Wei Bai a good master? If she was, she would have been struck by lightning long ago. Therefore, she collected the most hateful master template, and her eyes flashed a cold light. Foundation establishment sure is fast. Are you going to form your core and form your nascent soul in no time? Then you'll become my master. The most hateful masters were those who were jealous of their disciples. Anyone who saw this kind of master would want to beat him to death. Ning Yishu looked up, his eyes full of sincerity and gentleness. Disciples' achievements today, isn't it all because of master's teachings? Bai Wei Wei and the system were shocked at the same time, this ability to lie with open eyes, worthy of the male lead. You disciple. Ning Yishu's eyes deepened, but his expression didn't change. He gently said, okay, I'll roll. He then calmly retreated. This feeling, this response. She felt like a gentle and magnanimous papa was looking at her willful and cute daughter. Wei Wei Bai looked at her HP bar and her whole body trembled. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit, her HP bar actually decreased by a few points. She was clearly so vicious. How blind must he be to think that her vicious character wasn't vicious? The system suddenly said, the male lead is standing at your door. Wei Wei Bai, what is he standing at my door for? He finally reacted to my sarcasm and wants to beat me up. The system was silent for a while before saying, he is smiling. His smile is very affectionate. Bai Wei Wei. At the crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here. If you like, Transmigration system, Prince Charming, come here, comma. Chapter 385. The system said, in his heart, you've already been promoted from a shameless bitch to a super cute little princess. I think if you continue to do whatever you want for a few more days, the vicious image of you in his heart will be gone. Gone, then their whole family would be struck by lightning and disappear. Wei Wei Bai hugged her head in despair. This is forcing me to destroy a city, destroy a country, and slaughter all living things. The system also hugged its head in despair. I've read the book. This male lead is cold-hearted and black-bellied. If you slaughter a city or something, he'll probably be responsible for burying your body. He'll even think that you're cute and not pretentious, killing people when he wants to, such a magnanimous and pure personality. Wei Wei Bai said, this is a mental case. The system said, how many of those male leads in X points have a normal brain? Wei Wei Bai was speechless. The system's voice became heavy. Actually, I know that this side mission is like a mental case. That's why I rejected the request from the start, and the mainframe just sent the result yesterday. Wei Wei Bai couldn't wait. Does that mean I don't have to do the side mission anymore? The system said. Don't daydream. Do you think we're so easy to talk to? But I've lowered the difficulty for you. You just need to maintain your vicious image until the favorability is above 90, then you'll have completed the mission. Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. Fuck you, raising favorability is destroying the character setting. If you don't destroy the character setting, you'll lose favorability. Who can get favorability above 90? Wei Wei Bai said, I have a curse word to say. The system said, no need for that, thank you. Suddenly, Ning Yishu's voice came from outside the door. Master, I've got a new basin of water for you. For the first time, Wei Wei Bai felt that it was so difficult to conquer a person. She asked the system, if I put the basin on his head, will he strangle me? The system said, I'm worried that he'll take the opportunity to wet himself and seduce you. Wei Wei Bai scratched her head helplessly. I can't go on like this. Before the strategy is successful, I can't maintain my character anymore. Suddenly, she sighed helplessly. I can only torture him until he's unrecognizable and crying for his father and mother. Favorability could drop, but his character setting couldn't be destroyed. She had no choice but to give up on gaining favorability from the strategy and maintain her vicious and poisonous HP bar so that it wouldn't continue to drop. She asked the system, what stage is 60 points of favorability? The system flipped through the favorability information. Oh, I like you so much that I can't wait to stick to you every day. Wei Wei Bai nodded. That's easy. Then, she put on the look of an evil master. What are you dawdling for? Are you unwilling to serve me? You've been gone for so long that your legs are broken. Ning Yishu immediately came in and washed her feet again, despite the hardship. Wei Wei Bai lazily criticized him while enjoying his pedicure. Suddenly, she said casually, oh right, help me send out the invitations in 2 days. Ning Yishu's heart warmed. She was willing to let him do things, which meant that she was starting to trust him. His voice became softer. Yes, master. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 63. Wei Wei Bai thought, this is a scary increase in favorability. It was so difficult to increase in the beginning, but now it's increasing with just one sentence. Wei Wei Bai said calmly, remember to write my purpose clearly on the invitation. Ning Yishu lowered his head and looked at her cute toes with a burning gaze. He massaged them carefully and said, what does master want me to write? Martial arts competition for a spouse. Ning Yishu was speechless. He thought about the meaning of this sentence for a while before finally raising his head. There was a sinister light in his eyes. Martial arts competition for a spouse. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. // transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 387. Wei Wei Bai suddenly sneered, "What are you still doing here? You're only at the foundation establishment stage and you want to slack off. Hurry up and go meditate. When you reach the Aurus core stage, use half of your blood and the fire spiritual roots power in your body to heal my meridians." She had once been possessed by her own master. And now, she had learned all of those vicious methods one by one. And used them all on him. Ning Yishu's eyes flashed with a hint of bloodthirsty ferocity, then he immediately lowered his head to hide his terrifying expression. "Yes, master." After Ning Yishu left, Wei Wei Bai's fingers trembled. "Why do I feel like Ning Yishu wants to kill me?" The system said, "Do you have any misconceptions about your stupid, vicious, hypocritical, and superficial super brainless character? Even I want to kill you when I see it. Look at all the things she said, all the things she did. Even if the male lead didn't kill her, it would still be true love." Wei Wei Bai looked up at her character's HP bar. Very good, it finally increased a little. The vicious character was kept. But the favorability didn't drop. This was true love. Wei Wei Bai began to meditate and cultivate. After all, this character had the merit of being diligent. She actually had a merit. What a surprise. After meditating and absorbing some spiritual energy, Wei Wei Bai began to feel drowsy. Cultivating was so boring. Slagstem, this spiritual energy seems to be golden. The system said, "This is the male lead's pure yang energy. After absorbing it, you won't be able to sleep." As soon as it finished speaking, Bai Weiwei absorbed the pure yang energy that was similar to a drug, and her whole person fainted. Before she fell, a tall figure suddenly appeared beside her and carried her up. Her long flowing dress hung down. She quietly leaned on his chest and closed her eyes to sleep. Ning Yishu carried her and walked out. The moonlight flowers on the mountaintop had bloomed. When he came to find the moonlight flowers for her to calm her nerves, he saw this sea of flowers. His first reaction was to want to watch it with her. The moonlight flowers bloomed and withered. One by one, they were so beautiful that it was like a dream. Ning Yishu placed her in the flower field and laid down as well. He supported his face with his hands and looked at her quietly. "Master, do I look good?" He reached out and touched her face, his expression becoming incomparably gentle. "I never thought that I would like any woman. Sometimes, when I see people in love being so clingy, sending flowers, and looking at clouds, I feel like there's something wrong with their brains. But today, I found out that once you fall in love with someone, you will naturally want to do such foolish things." If he liked something, he wanted to give it to her with both hands. As long as she was willing to look at him, he would be so happy that he could not sleep at night. He clearly knew what kind of person she was. Those who were ruthless, jealous, shallow in love with power, and had no value were all trash. If there was value to be made use of, he would kick them away. She had so many flaws, but when they entered his eyes, he naturally thought that she was cute in every way. He painstakingly suppressed his power because he knew what kind of person she was. Once she knew that his power was greater than hers, she would start to be defensive and afraid of him. It was all because of those who hurt her that she became so extreme. Ning Yishu's fingers slowly moved down. Her quiet and beautiful face, under the moonlight flowers, had a kind of clean and pure purity. "I don't care how willfully and viciously you want to live." In fact, if she was happy, he could not wait to hold her like this every day. But Ning Yishu's eyes gradually became twisted and sinister. How can you use yourself as a bargaining chip to seduce other men? Address of the full text, https://www. Sashu. Com address of the Chapter 388. The system felt like it was repeating a pornographic novel if it had to verbally describe what happened last night. So it directly sent the recorded image to her. After Wei Wei Bai finished reading, she was silent for a long time. The system thought she was scared. Men will become perverted when they hold it in for too long. Your disciple seems to have held it in for too long. Wei Wei Bai was confused. I, the prettiest woman in this world, was lying on the ground naked and he could still hold it in. My disciple must have wilted. System, isn't the point that you were stripped naked? Wei Wei Bai came back to her senses. I feel like Ning Yishu is turning black. The system said, not only is he turning black, but his cultivation speed has also increased. He also has a lot of ancient treasures and scrolls, plus the blood-stained dagger that he unexpectedly obtained. It's about to be unlocked. There was a grandfatherly existence in the dagger. The heavenly soul was locked inside. Once it was awakened, Ning Yishu would become the master of the world. When that time comes, the male lead would be able to control the spiritual energy of the world, and Soar would be a piece of cake. Originally, it was supposed to be a plot of 18 million words, but now it can be finished with less than 80,000 words. Wei Wei Bai was speechless for a moment. So, the plot is broken. The system said, it's the male lead's plot that's broken, but your plot as the cannon fodder hasn't. In 2 months, you'll be refining him into a pill and throwing him off the cliff. You just have to promise that you can do it, and the plot won't be broken. Wei Wei Bai said, he'll probably become a deity in 2 months. How can a cannon fodder like me refine him into a pill? In the original work, Wei Wei Bai was able to refine Ning Yishu into a pill because Ning Yishu was just a normal person at that time. The system was not sincere. You have to believe that you can stand shoulder to shoulder with the sun. Wei Wei Bai, suddenly, a soul-stirring call came from outside the door. Master. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a while before she suppressed her trembling voice. Then, he put on a vicious mask. What are you yelling for? Are you trying to wake me up? I'm so disheartened to hear your voice so early in the morning. Hurry up and get in here. In her heart, tears of sorrow flowed like a river. Was she trying to get a strategy, or was she trying to court death? Ning Yishu respectfully came in with a basin. Yes, master. He was here to serve Wei Wei Bai, just like an old ox who was willing to work without complaint. Even if Bai Wei Wei abused and scolded him, he was still willing to endure, loyal and devoted. Wei Wei Bai, I've seen masochists before, but I've never seen one who's shaking so much. Master, I have already sent out the marriage proposal. Ning Yishu lowered his head and said calmly. Wei Wei Bai smiled. That's good. Pass down the order and let the disciples of Grand Heaven's Mountain prepare. When the descendants of the 3 days are all here, I will begin to choose my future husband. Ning Yishu's eyes were gloomy, but he didn't reveal anything. Okay. Wei Wei Bai suddenly reached out and grabbed his clothes, pulling him forward. Come here for a moment. Ning Yishu couldn't help but raise his head. He saw that she had no choice but to lower her head and kiss him. A familiar power flowed into her body. Her meridians were damaged by the cold air of the water spirit scripture. And the unfamiliar power in his body just so happened to be a warm type, a good medicine to heal her. Wei Wei Bai kissed him for a while, then let go of him. She frowned. My current body is only about 60 to 70% healed. He knew what she was worried about. If her body wasn't good enough, her magic power wouldn't be strong enough. If she accidentally lost to a weaker man, she would definitely be very angry. Wei Wei Bai thought for a while, then suddenly said reluctantly, "Don't leave me for the next few days." Ning Yishu suddenly raised his head, a hint of surprise flashing through his eyes. For the 4 comma. Chapter 389. You can search Transmigration System, Male God, come to Shushu. Calm on Baidu to find the S. Wei Wei Bai coldly said, "Come here." Ning Yishu obediently came to her side. She casually placed her hand on his shoulder with a hint of unconscious charm in her eyes. "Come, hold me." Ning Yishu's fingers trembled and his muscles tightened. "Are you deaf? Hold me." Wei Wei Bai raised her eyebrows in dissatisfaction. Ning Yishu lowered his head and couldn't suppress the heat in his eyes. He reached out and easily picked her up. Just as he picked her up, her fingers pressed against his chest, and a ray of white light entered his body. Ning Yishu fiercely shook and a sharp pain followed. Very quickly, Wei Wei Bai guided the golden power from his chest and continuously entered her body. Ning Yishu was in so much pain that he broke out in a cold sweat. Although the power she extracted was only a small part of his body, it couldn't injure him. She couldn't hurt him, but her method of extracting power was particularly insidious. If he really was a Foundation Establishment stage disciple, this kind of method of extracting spiritual energy would have crippled his body. Wei Wei Bai obtained a lot of golden power and her body suddenly became light. Because of the excess power, her black hair unexpectedly glowed and her face was bright red, more beautiful than a flower. Wei Wei Bai gave a satisfied sigh and then lazily curled up in his arms like a cat that had eaten its fill. Seeing her like this, Ning Yishu felt his heart beating faster and faster. The sharp pain turned into a strange feeling of satisfaction. "Master, do you want more?" Wei Wei Bai almost broke off her evil mask. She had a sinister face like the Black Mountain Demon and sucked his power. Wouldn't a normal person hold a grudge and feel disgusted? Could it be that Ning Yishu had a forbearing nature, so he was smiling at her on the surface, but in his heart he was peeling her skin and cutting her flesh? Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 68. Wei Wei Bai. Then, she looked up and saw that her character's HP bar had dropped to 1/3. She was in despair. She felt that she must be wearing a fake evil mask. This could even increase favorability. How could this destroy her vicious persona? Ning Yishu looked at the satisfied expression on her face and felt that she was so cute that he couldn't describe his feelings. If she could feel comfortable and happy while absorbing his power, he would want to send himself to her. The system looked at its despairing host. She then looked at the male lead, who obviously had a hole in his head and had a satisfied expression on his face. It silently ate the expired spicy strips. This was simply the daily life of the poop picker and his cat master. Wei Wei Bai's face was deathly pale. She had spent 3 days in agony. Over the past 3 days, her image in Ning Yishu's heart had crumbled to the point where only 1/10 of it remained. No matter how ruthless she was, he would tolerate her. Her favorability towards him increased instead of decreasing. He was already 70 years old. She and the system hugged each other as they trembled. They felt that the 9th heaven profound lightning was about to split them into pieces. This was the first time she saw the favorability increase. She was so scared that she wanted to beg Ning Yishu, the masochist of the century, not to increase it. Fortunately, she was quick-witted and suddenly said to him coldly, "Go and see, I heard that the soul formation stage Brother Yuqin has also come. Quickly get everyone in Grand Heaven's Mountain to go and welcome him." Ning Yishu was silent for a moment before asking softly, "Yuqin Immortal Monarch?" Wei Wei Bai immediately put on an incomparably pretentious little girl's expression. "That's right, we've known each other for several decades. We once helped each other when we were cultivating together." He's extremely talented and his cultivation speed is even faster than mine. He's simply the man of my dreams. When she said this, she felt goosebumps all over her body. "Master, do you like him a lot?" Ning Yishu's voice deepened. "You'll see it the next time you open the bookshelf. If you like." Chapter 390. Could Wei Wei Bai say that she didn't like him? She didn't even know if that Yuqin Immortal was a cat or a dog. But to maintain her extremely stupid character, she could only force herself to hold on. She looked shy and infatuated. Brother Yuqin is so perfect, anyone would like him. As she spoke, she spun in circles happily, just like the brainless Mary Sue, her eyes full of pink stars and her face full of infatuation. "Ah, I didn't expect that he would receive an invitation and come back. He must be interested in me too." Ning Yishu's heart turned cold. He looked at her in a daze and realized that her eyes were full of love. She was so cold to him usually. But at this moment she was as happy as a young girl in love. He slowly realized that she really wanted to find a man who was stronger than her. No, she liked the Yuqin from the start, right? Wei Wei Bai suddenly waved her hand and a red wedding dress appeared. "I believe that Brother Yuqin can definitely defeat everyone. When the time comes, I will directly admit defeat and be with him." This sentence was simply heart-wrenching. She let everyone compete, and the one who won the best would compete with her. And she had already decided on the man she wanted from the start. Ning Yishu's mind was a little blank. He looked at the red wedding dress in her hand, his eyes stinging and bloodshot. "Why are you still in a daze here? Get lost." Wei Wei Bai's face turned cold, and she looked at him with a bit of disgust. The faint gentleness on Ning Yishu's face disappeared. He was silent for a while, then said, "Yes, master." When he turned around and walked out, the expression on his face was completely distorted. The suppressed darkness in his eyes seeped out bit by bit. The huge amount of spiritual power in his body was almost surging out. Ning Yishu sealed the crazy power in his body. If he couldn't control it now, it could destroy half of Grand Heaven's Mountain. He didn't want her to be scared. Wei Wei Bai saw that he had left, and saw that her character's health bar had finally stabilized and was still rising. Just now, she had casually pulled a man over to save the situation. As expected, Ning Yishu felt very uncomfortable. Whenever he was upset, the main system would feel that she hadn't violated her character setting. Wei Wei Bai sighed. "I feel that it's time for me to write my will. I'm afraid that I won't be able to reach 90 favorable impression points. Mistreating Ning Yishu like this. It would be strange if his favorability continued to increase, but she couldn't be gentle and friendly to increase his favorability." As soon as he refreshed, his persona collapsed. System, this is the first time I've seen the host so lacking in confidence. It suddenly felt like writing a suicide note. The groom contest began. Grand Heaven's Mountain was decorated with lanterns and colored banners. The character, sheet was written everywhere. A group of several hundred-years-old youths gathered at the round plaza of Grand Heaven's Mountain. When Wei Wei Bai stepped out of the door, she looked at the sky tragically and said, "Tong, there are so many people here today. Can you play some normal background music?" Every time there were many people, the most beautiful metal would automatically activate. The system said, "You can only choose a few background songs." Wei Wei Bai asked, "Which ones?" "Perturbed, Love Business, the most dazzling ethnic trend, Tracker's Love, and a song of the Nameless King that can't be changed once it's played." It was so low that it made her feel like she was Bai Tsuehua from the neighboring village going to the market. The song of the Nameless King sounded very stylish. Wei Wei Bai asked, "Then what about the song of the king?" The system hesitated. "Once it's played, it can't be stopped. It will keep repeating. Are you sure you won't regret it?" Wei Wei Bai said, "I don't believe that the song of the king can be compared to Perturbed Bowl." Just as she finished choosing the song, Ning Yishu had already come to her side. He said calmly, "Master, everyone is here." Chapter 391. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Then, her long dress fluttered in the wind as she flew to the round platform like an immortal. There were many young talents around, and there were also many men and women who came to watch the show. It looked unusually lively. Wei Wei Bai looked around as if she was looking for something. Ning Yishu had already walked to her side. Although he still had a respectful expression, his eyes were even more sinister and terrifying. He heard her say softly, "Where's Brother Yuqin?" As soon as she said this, Wei Wei Bai felt a chill run down her back, as if someone had stuffed ice cubes into her clothes. The evil character's HP bar above her head rose again. This meant that Ning Yishu was especially uncomfortable. Wei Wei Bai had never accepted such a fucked-up side mission. She maintained her infatuated expression and continued to look for Yuqin. In the original work's Pitiful Memories, there was a period of time when she did indeed go on a mission with Yuqin. And they got along quite well. So what she said was not a lie. Suddenly, a huge feather fan flew over with a dazzling light. A man dressed in white was sitting elegantly on a feather fan. He was handsome and elegant. "Wei Wei, I heard that you were looking for a cultivation partner, so I specially came out of seclusion and rushed over." Wei Wei Bai's dead fish eyes paused for a moment before she immediately adjusted her state of mind. She smiled shyly. "Brother Yuqin." Yes, in that short period of time together, Yuqin and Wei Wei Bai called each other good brother, good sister. Two pretentious people. Yuqin landed in front of her. The huge feather fan shrank, and he reached out to hold it and fanned it elegantly. "Sister, I haven't seen you in 20 years. You've actually become more beautiful." Yuqin smiled gently. Brother, I haven't seen you in 20 years, and you're already at the late stage of the soul formation stage." When Wei Wei Bai called him brother, she almost bit off her tongue. The wind at the top of the mountain was strong. The two of them were wearing long skirts and long clothes. For a moment, they looked like a celestial couple, leisurely and faintly discernible. They were just short of riding the wind and flying away together. Ding, I'm the most beautiful metal activated. Photoshop and beautify. There are many beauties at the scene and they are making ugly graffiti. Suddenly, everyone present felt that this immortal couple was exceptionally pleasing to the eye. Everything around him was dim and dull. He felt that only Wei Wei Bai was so beautiful. And Wei Wei Bai also heard it. The background music of Kings started playing. BGM Song of the King, loudspeaker roars, the cultivation world's largest XX factory has closed down. That son of a bitch boss, Wang He, owed 350 million yuan from eating, drinking, whoring, and gambling. He took his sister-in-law and ran away. We don't have a choice. We can only use beautiful women to pay for our wages. The original price of the peerless beauties was over 100, 200, and 300, but they were all priced at 990 yuan. 990 yuan. Wei Wei Bai, the system explained, this background music can stimulate people's desire to compete with each other. When there's a discount in the supermarket, don't people go crazy to buy it? When it's on sale on Taobao for $9.09 with shipping, don't you want to buy it? Wei Wei Bai, the system comforted her, sometimes, the vulgar is the elegant. You, hold on. Wei Wei Bai felt that she couldn't hold on anymore. If she had known earlier, she would have chosen to cook. Why did she have to be the #1 beauty for no reason? In the end, it actually fell to 990 yuan. When Yu Chen saw her, he didn't know why, but a special desire to plunder surged in his heart. He smiled faintly. Good sister, brother will go and defeat those people and marry you. Wei Wei Bai maintained her smiling mask. Go ahead, Ning Yishu stood at the side. The wind blew through his bangs, revealing his calm eyes. The. Chapter 392. This was the first time he saw Wei Wei Bai look at a man differently. Was it because that man was at the semi-god stage? The dagger in his pocket began to tremble slightly, emitting an ominous light. Ning Yishu slowly pressed his hand on the dagger and grabbed it fiercely. The dagger cut his palm and blood gushed out. All of it was absorbed by the dagger. But he didn't feel any pain at all. Wei Wei Bai and Yu Chen exchanged pleasantries for a while. The HP bar above her head slowly rose to 90%. In his heart, she had once again become that vicious woman from the beginning. Wei Wei Bai's smile stiffened as she sent Yu Chen away. Then, she waved her hand and announced the start of the marriage contest. Those who were interested in the contest lined up to take the number plate and were about to compete one by one. However, Yu Chen landed on the stage and fanned himself elegantly. All of you can come together. I'm still in a hurry to marry Sister Wei Wei. Late stage semi-god stage was almost invincible. Most of the people who came were at the nascent soul stage. In the cultivation world, there were many nascent soul stage cultivators who couldn't beat a semi-god stage cultivator. If it was normal times, everyone would definitely not come up to compete when they were rational. But for some reason, they looked up at Wei Wei Bai. They felt as if they were looking at a particularly beautiful piece of jade. If they didn't fight for it, it would be a loss. Therefore, several late-stage nascent soul stage male cultivators took out their life-bound magic weapons and jumped on the stage to compete. Wei Wei Bai stood high up and listened to the strange background music. She looked like she wanted to die but couldn't. Suddenly, Ning Yishu gently held her hand. Wei Wei Bai had been a vicious person for too long. She reflexively flung her hand away and her eyes turned cold. What are you doing? Ning Yishu's finger stopped in midair. He said softly, Master, can I go on stage to compete? Wei Wei Bai smiled coldly. You're just a foundation establishment stage trash. Do you want to go up and die? Ning Yishu suddenly smiled. His usually quiet and dull eyes suddenly glowed with a strange light. For a moment, even his aura changed. He maintained his unhurried tone. For Master, what is there to fear even if I die? Bai Weiwei seemed to have just returned to her senses. She glanced at him indifferently. Since you want to die, then go ahead. After saying that, she kicked him down the stairs. Ning Yishu did not resist at all. The last trace of hesitation in his eyes completely disappeared. If it was said that at the beginning, he still wanted to quietly accompany her. But now, she had completely given up on him. The man she wanted was never a piece of trash like him. On the other hand, Weiwei Bai's HP bar was completely full. In Ning Yishu's heart, her vicious personality had finally taken root. Yuchen dealt with more than half of the pursuers very easily. He waved his magic fan with a calm smile on his face. Suddenly, a figure fell from a high place and lay on the ground. Yuchen took a look. It seemed to be Weiwei Bai's trash disciple who had just reached the foundation establishment stage. This kind of trash should have been dealt with long ago. Only Weiwei Bai was still alive. The joke that he couldn't cultivate because of his single spiritual root had long spread throughout the cultivation world. Yuchen casually waved his hand, and a terrifying and sharp attack directly attacked Ning Yishu, who was lying on the ground. The soul formation stage and the foundation establishment stage. The difference between heaven and earth was more than just the difference between heaven and earth. Yuchen knew that he couldn't miss this attack. Ning Yishu would definitely die. Ning Yishu was also waiting. He quietly looked at Weiwei Bai, who was standing high up, and saw the coldness in her eyes. When the attack came, he suddenly laughed. It was a self-deprecating laugh. You can see it when you open the bookshelf next time. If you like. Chapter 393. Could it be that he was still hoping that she would look at him more? From the beginning, it was just his wishful thinking. In the illusion, he was the only one who was infatuated with her special dependence, her every frown and smile. The attack came crashing down, completely enveloping him. But Bai Weiwei never made a move to save him. Ding! The male lead's favorability has increased to 65. Weiwei Bai heard the notification that the favorability had dropped, and her face became haggard. She knew that she had finally completely destroyed the little bit of pity in Ning Yishu's heart. Now, her vicious character did not collapse at all, and she was steadily full of health. Sigh, it won't be so easy for his favorability to increase in the future. Weiwei Bai said very rationally. It was rare for the system to not be sarcastic. It felt that this side mission was too crazy and unreasonable. It comforted, this mission will take a long time, you can take it slowly. Out of the 16 months, he had only stayed for a month now. Weiwei Bai said, it has to be like this, otherwise I wouldn't dare to pursue him. Now, it's fine for me to say that I like him, he definitely won't think that I'm a little white lotus. System, on the high platform, after that attack. Suddenly, the clear sky was covered with dark clouds, and a violent vortex appeared in the middle of the sky. The spirit energy suddenly changed, the spirit energy in a radius of millions of miles seemed to have received some kind of summon, and was crazily swept over by the vortex. Yu Qin had just finished off a few nascent soul stage cultivators when his expression suddenly changed. Someone was going to form a nascent soul. Who was so heaven-defying to be able to cause such a violent spirit energy fluctuation? The violent spirit energy fluctuation was like a hurricane, forcing everyone to retreat. Under that terrifying and vast vortex, all the spirit energy gathered in the clouds flashed like lightning and thunder. The illusion of a golden dragon hovered in the black spirit energy vortex. The lightning tribulation rumbled down. Everyone fled, afraid that they would be struck to death by this incomparably terrifying lightning tribulation. Even Yu Qin, who was in the late stage of soul formation, revealed a shocked expression. He quickly left. Wherever the lightning tribulation struck, not even a blade of grass grew. Wei Wei Bai and the system were silent for a while. This isn't normal. Didn't he just form his gold core? How did you form your nascent soul? This was how the novel was written, and it ended before it even hit the shelves. Furthermore, the formation of a nascent soul was too terrifying. The system said, "This is the male lead's own plot to ruin, it has nothing to do with us. Just remember to turn him into a pill and throw him off the cliff 2 months later." Wei Wei Bai. If Ning Yishu is already in SOAR in 2 months, who am I going to kick? Such a terrifying cultivation speed was indeed possible. Seeing that the lightning tribulation was about to descend, Wei Wei Bai immediately raised her sleeves and was about to flee for her life. The lightning tribulation would not only strike the person who was going through the tribulation. Everyone around would be struck. However, before she could fly up, an enormous and terrifying force pressed her down. Wei Wei Bai felt a tightness in her chest. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. Thunder rumbled, one after another, and struck down. Wei Wei Bai quickly used all the abilities of this body to resist the lightning tribulation. Most of the lightning tribulation struck Ning Yishu's position, but she did not have a good time either. She was held in place by that enormous force and could not escape at all. This was definitely the most thrilling moment she had ever faced. She struggled to hold on, her treasures were damaged, and her spiritual energy was depleted. Every time she thought that she was going to die, she was crushed by the lightning tribulation and had to use her life points to buy life-saving items. The lightning tribulation would be separated. Then, when she caught her breath, the lightning tribulation would increase in intensity. Only then did Wei Wei Bai know that the lightning that struck her was controlled by Ning Yishu. https://www.sashu.com/ Full text, https://www.sashu.com. Download text, https://www.sashu.com. Comma. Chapter 394. After he lost pity for her, he started to take revenge on her. After being struck by lightning for half a day, Wei Wei Bai was so tired that she wanted to just lie flat on the ground. Come on, let the lightning rain come more fiercely. But thinking of her character setting, she could only continue to hold on. When Wei Wei Bai suspected that she was about to turn into ashes, the color of the sky suddenly changed. A cold and gloomy power broke through the sky. The blood-stained dagger that belonged to Ning Yishu appeared in the sky. The power of the lightning and thunder was all swallowed by the dagger. The dagger was unlocked and the heavenly soul was awakened. The dagger kept growing and started to become crystal clear. In the end, it became a long sword with a destructive aura. A slender and beautiful hand simply held the hilt of the sword. All the surging attacks in the world calmed down. The dark clouds dispersed and golden light sprinkled down. A tall figure slowly walked out of the light. Wei Wei Bai lay on the ground. Her clothes were ragged and her face was pale. She looked up and saw him slowly approaching her. It was still the same familiar face, but his face was like a jade sculpture. His long eyebrows reached his temples and he was extraordinarily handsome. He slowly bent down and looked at her with a strange gaze that made her hair stand on end. "Master, does it hurt?" He revealed a gentle and affectionate smile. That once wooden expression was covered by an extraordinary radiance. Wei Wei Bai was about to speak, but when she opened her mouth, she wanted to vomit blood. Shock and disbelief flashed in her eyes. "Ning Yishu." Ning Yishu's smile did not change, but his eyes were deep and gloomy. His voice was soft and hoarse. "Wait for me, master." Before Wei Wei Bai could react, the blood-stained sword suddenly appeared. It broke through the sky and earth and shattered space to catch up to Yu Qin, who was already thousands of miles away from Grand Heaven's mountain. The sword pierced through the heart and shattered his soul. Yu Qin died. Killing a late-stage soul formation cultivator was like killing an ant. Ning Yishu summoned the blood-stained sword and brought Yu Chen's broken body. He tossed it far away, and the corpse was scattered all over the ground. Wei Wei Bai shuddered. What the fuck? How savage. After Ning Yishu finished killing people, he turned around and saw her trembling eyes. Was her heart aching for Yu Qin? His expression darkened. "Master, the strongest person is already dead, so it's your turn to compete with me." She would compete with the man who won. If he won, she would be his. Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. Her body was affected by the lightning tribulation. Her half-healed meridians were torn apart again. Competition. Yu Qin was deader than dead. He wasn't going to skin her alive, was he? Wei Wei Bai thought about how she should react. She was stupid and pretentious. She had touched a sore spot. Her lips trembled. "You want to kill me?" Ning Yishu's expression froze. Suddenly, a smile appeared on his face. As the smile grew wider, his eyes began to distort. "I'll kill you," he said each word through gritted teeth. The coldness was enough to freeze a person completely. "Didn't you want to kill me?" In her eyes, he was just a piece of trash at the foundation establishment stage. When he wanted to compete, she didn't even ask him why. She threw away her feelings for him like trash. She even kicked him onto the competition stage and let him die. If he hadn't had a fortuitous encounter and unlocked the dagger, he would have really died. The moment he faced Yu Chen's attack, his heart turned completely cold. He was also completely awake. His master wasn't his little girl. Even though he was special to her in the illusory realm, she still wanted to use him. So what was he asking for? Her love. Chapter 395. Wei Wei Bai felt that her image as a stupid and poisonous person should have been as stable as Mount Tai. It definitely wouldn't collapse. She immediately changed her attitude and said in a gentle tone, "You are my disciple, why would I kill you?" Only a pig would believe this. Ning Yishu was stunned. He repeated softly, "Master, you don't want to kill me. You believe this." Bai Weiwei was just about to reveal a smile and brush up a wave of favorability. However, in the next second, Ning Yishu's expression turned sinister. If you don't want to kill me, then why are you with another man? He wouldn't feel pain even if she killed him with her own hands. However, if she delivered herself into the hands of another man, that would be a murder to him. Weiwei Bai really wanted to reach out her hand and ask him to listen to her explanation. However, before she could explain, Ning Yishu had already placed the sword on her neck. He asked softly, "Master, do you admit defeat?" Weiwei Bai's face turned pale. "I admit defeat." There was no begging for mercy. There was only fear and a desire to live in her eyes. He knew that she didn't admit defeat at all in her heart. Instead, she was like a poisonous snake, pleading weakly on the surface. Once she found a chance, she would definitely hate him so much that she would kill him. Ning Yishu's smile was somewhat sorrowful. He clearly wanted to protect her. But he forced her into this situation. Ning Yishu put away his sword and hugged her. "If you admit defeat, we can get married." This sentence, even if he didn't get her approval, his heart would soften. In any case, immortal cultivators had a long time. There would be a day when she would be moved by him. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 70. He hugged her and walked back step by step. Grand Heaven's mountain was affected by the lightning tribulation and more than half of it was destroyed. Ning Yishu suddenly threw out a mustard seed bag. All things were hidden in the mustard seed bag. A blessed land was erected on Grand Heaven's mountain. In the blink of an eye, they walked in. Purple chi filled the air, pavilions, terraces, and pagodas, birdsong, and the fragrance of flowers. Weiwei Bai took a look. Wasn't this Weiwei Bai's childhood home that she and the system had simulated? Who would have thought that Ning Yishu would purposely build such a garden? Ning Yishu carried her to the side of the spirit spring. After the spirit spring was bombarded by the lightning tribulation, the mountain that covered it had disappeared, revealing it. He knew that Weiwei Bai would not dare to resist, so he slowly took off her clothes and gently bathed her. Weiwei Bai was lying on the edge of the spirit spring. From time to time, she would look at him in confusion and fear. It wasn't that Ning Yishu didn't understand her fear. After all, she had suffered so much to become the master of Grand Heaven's mountain. And now, his strength was clearly much stronger than hers. It was only natural that she would be disgusted and fearful. Ning Yishu pretended not to see the rejection in her eyes. After the shower, he carried the defenseless woman into the bedroom. In the middle of the room, there was a conspicuous red wedding dress. He began to put on the bright red wedding dress for her. Weiwei Bai finally reacted. She looked at him suspiciously. "Are you cultivating some kind of demonic cultivation technique?" Ning Yishu paused in the middle of fixing her sleeves. He was silent for a moment before saying, "Don't worry, master. I'm cultivating the orthodox cultivation technique." Weiwei Bai stiffly forced out a smile. "Could it be that you're some kind of powerful senior who succeeded in possessing someone's body?" Ning Yishu's heart was filled with a kind of bitter and sour pain. His voice was hoarse as he asked, "If I'm possessing someone's body, then your disciple is already dead." Weiwei Bai's expression changed. "You're really possessing someone's body?" Ning Yishu raised his head and saw a ruthless disgust flash through her eyes. He was dazed for a moment. He asked in disbelief, "Do you care that much about that trash of a disciple of yours?" Possessing someone's body meant that he was someone else. And Ning Yishu's soul had already disappeared. Chapter 396. Wei Wei Bai desperately suppressed the killing intent in her eyes. She wanted to smile, but her smile was a bit ugly and her voice was affected. So it was a senior with great magical powers. That disciple of mine was very stupid and useless. If you killed him, then just kill him. When Wei Wei Bai said this, she couldn't suppress the anger in her eyes. Her whole body was tense and her flattering smile could be seen with difficulty. Ning Yishu stared at her in a daze. Her reaction, a huge wave of ecstasy hit him. He didn't dare to believe it. Did she care about him? Because she cared and found out that he might have been possessed, she looked at him with such anger and disgust. Her disguise was too clumsy. Anyone could see that although she said she didn't care, the anger in her eyes couldn't wait to burn him to death. The despair in Ning Yishu's eyes was dyed with a bit of hope. She still cared about him just a little bit. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 75. Wei Wei Bai, this favorability, just a little bit of perfunctory and it's going crazy. Ning Yishu finally smiled sincerely, I haven't been possessed. Master, I had a fortuitous encounter, that's why my cultivation speed is so amazing. Wei Wei Bai was stunned for a while, as if she was searching for some kind of heaven-defying fortuitous encounter that could make a person's cultivation soar. Ning Yishu stretched out his hand. There was a blood-stained dagger lying on it. This dagger hides a heavenly soul. It can control the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and can infinitely increase a person's cultivation speed. Wei Wei Bai looked at the dagger and suddenly reached out to grab it. But before she could touch it, her fingers were already burned. Ning Yishu maintained the same position, quietly watching her movements. It was as if he already knew that she would have this kind of reaction. Ning Yishu gently smiled, but his eyes were as cold as ice. I knew that master was only pretending to be worried about me to find out my cultivation method. She kicked him onto the stage and watched as he was attacked by a spirit-severing cultivator. How could someone like her have the slightest bit of pity for him? Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but feel guilty when she saw that she couldn't seize it. She chuckled, "You're my disciple. Seeing that your cultivation is so high, I'm happy for you." That insincere look on her face. However, Ning Yishu no longer believed her words. In the illusion, she was able to smile at her enemies, but in the blink of an eye, she was able to use the cruelest method to kill her own master. She had never been a kind person. Instead, it was extremely vicious. Ning Yishu helped her put on the wedding dress. The bright red wedding dress dragged on the ground, and the bright light made her beautiful face look as charming as a peach blossom. Master is so handsome. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched and she suddenly stood up. Her wedding dress swayed with her steps. Ning Yishu fiercely grabbed her hand, his gaze sharp. Master, where are you going? Bai Wei Wei wanted to shake him off, but she hesitated and didn't dare to do so. She forced herself to smile. Aren't we going to get married? Let's quickly go and worship the heavens and earth. The cultivation world was quite down to earth, and the wedding customs weren't much different from those of the human world. The only difference was that they would have a dual cultivation partner at the end. Ning Yishu's expression softened. The next moment, he heard her say, "We're going to get married. Can you give me half of the dagger's spiritual energy? I also want to break through to the spirit-severing stage." Ning Yishu's eyes were covered with a layer of frost. He pursed his lips and didn't say anything. Just when Wei Wei Bai thought he was going to kill someone, he suddenly laughed. "We're going to get married. Whatever you want, I'll get it for you." Wei Wei Bai's smile brightened. "Then can you give it to me now?" Ning Yishu's smile gradually froze. He finally couldn't suppress the coldness in his eyes, and the surrounding spiritual energy began to fluctuate. Master, you only want my spiritual energy. You don't want me as a person. Chapter 397. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment. Just as she was about to defend herself, she was thrown onto the bed before she could say anything. Fuck. She raised her head in surprise and attacked. Unfortunately, that fierce attack was instantly neutralized. The spiritual energy in the air didn't listen to her command. She raised her hand, but it was firmly grasped by someone. A thin golden chain of spiritual power bound her hands, sealing all of the spiritual power in her body in an instant. Wei Wei Bai's vicious and unruly temper could no longer be suppressed. Ning Yishu, you trash, do you want to deceive your master and destroy your ancestors? Ning Yishu pressed her down. His black hair fell over his shoulders, and his eyes were cold without a trace of tenderness. In your eyes, have I always been trash that doesn't deserve you? Wei Wei Bai angrily glared at him. You had such a great opportunity but didn't give it to me. Instead, you took it for yourself. Now that you're stronger than me, you want to take revenge and torture me. Ning Yishu suddenly remembered. Her sect was once exterminated by her own master, and then she was tortured and possessed. In the end, she killed her master. He didn't participate in the past, so how did she kill her master alone? This doubt flashed through his mind. With this kind of experience, she must have thought that he came to take revenge and kill her. Wei Wei Bai opened her mouth and bit his arm. She, who had lost her spiritual energy, couldn't bite him at all. Seeing her desperately struggling, Ning Yishu gently held her head. He lowered his head and captured her lips. He rubbed and licked, as if he wanted to swallow her whole. This kiss was filled with despair and pity. Wei Wei Bai's scalp went numb from his kiss. With great difficulty, he waited until he was done kissing her. Only then did he reluctantly release her. Seeing that her eyes were watery and her cheeks were bright red from his kiss, the restless dark possessiveness in his heart dissipated a little. He picked her up. I once thought of sharing this great opportunity with you, so that your cultivation path would be smoother. Ning Yishu's footsteps were extremely fast. Soon, they arrived at Grand Heaven's Mountain, the place where the dual cultivation brother's soul was branded. Wei Wei Bai's face was a little pale, and her eyes were still filled with uncertainty. He didn't know what Ning Yishu was planning. Ning Yishu placed her, who had lost her spiritual energy, on top of the soul branding array. It's a pity that I'm worried. Master, you're too powerful. In the illusion, he knew her character. She had never been attracted to anyone. It was only special to someone because that person had value. The only person who could make her happy was Yu Qin. Yu Qin was killed by him, so she probably hated him a lot. Ning Yishu began to extend his finger, and streams of powerful golden spiritual energy began to modify the soul branding array. The function of this spirit array was to brand a soul imprint on each other's souls. This mark allowed people to know where their partner was, whether they were dead or not, and other simple information. Furthermore, it was very easy to undo it. The spirit design slowly became more complex. The complicated patterns were like chains, beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Wei Wei Bai also knew some common knowledge about spirit arrays. She felt that something was wrong when she saw this spirit array. What are you doing? Ning Yishu. Ning Yishu injected his best spiritual energy into the spirit array. In the golden light, his expression became stubborn and crazy. Soul branding. No, I want to lock the soul. No one will be able to undo our dual cultivation imprint. He walked to the middle of the spirit array and looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the ground without any strength. The madness in his eyes finally revealed itself. Chapter 398. Master, I know you don't like me, he said softly. Wei Wei Bai, you know yourself well. He saw the undisguised coldness in her eyes and laughed coldly. It's a pity that you and I, master and disciple, are going to be locked together forever. The array was activated. Golden light surged all over the sky. Ning Yishu said loudly, I, Ning Yishu, am willing to be with Wei Wei Bai forever. With the heavens and earth as the medium, with all living things as witnesses, with souls as sacrifice, and with life and death as our bond. The words of the oath triggered the formation. Wei Wei Bai felt like she was in the background. Ning Yishu had finished his oath and was going through the wedding steps alone. She was tied up like a pig and thrown into the middle of the array, unable to move. The system said, something's wrong with this array. Wei Wei Bai said, isn't it like this in the cultivation world? Putting a mark on a dual cultivation partner is like putting a stamp on a piece of pork and selling it. Ning Yishu's array was at most a little more complicated, but they couldn't get a divorce. It was better if they couldn't get a divorce. That way, he would feel safe and his favorability would increase. The system was silent for a while, as if it was looking for something. Suddenly, its tone became serious. Oh my God, Ning Yishu's lungs. This ancient array can really lock souls. It was Wei Wei Bai's first time hearing its tone so serious. If you can't lock souls, I'll break the spiritual chains for you. Get up and fight him. Wei Wei Bai said, fight? No, how much life points do you need to break the chains for me? The system said generously, this time, it's all on me. It's free. Hurry up and stop the soul-locking array. Wei Wei Bai was tired, why should I stop it? I didn't violate my character setting. The system was going crazy. It's not a matter of your character setting. It's a matter of the array that Ning Yishu created. It's able to lock down the system's ability to traverse through space. If you really end up soul-bonded with him, you won't be able to leave once the 16 months are up. Wei Wei Bai, you lousy system. How could you let someone from a different plane lock the passage back to their home? This was too useless. Ning Yishu came to her side and saw that she was dressed in red. Her face was pale, and she seemed to be struggling with all her might. She raised her head, and her mask of disguise finally shattered. Ning Yishu, you're crazy. This array will entangle our two souls together. Of course Ning Yishu knew what she was afraid of. She had always looked down on him, even though her personality was vicious and superficial. But what she hated the most was being tied up and threatened, and he wanted to completely trap her by his side. Ning Yishu slowly placed his hand on her chest. In the center of his palm was the shrinking array. His eyes were red, and his expression was firm and twisted. Master, just stay with me. I'll give you whatever you want. Instead of giving it to her now, only for her to kick him away. People can't be too greedy. You can't just want my abilities and not me. These words were said miserably and aggrievedly. But his movements were ruthless and heartless. The array was pressed into her chest bit by bit. Under the golden light, the despair in her eyes could be seen clearly. The array in Ning Yishu's hand completely entered her body. At the same time, the same array appeared on his chest. Their souls slowly intertwined with each other. Ning Yishu reached out and gently stroked her delicate face. His body couldn't help but tremble. Master, I know you don't want to, but I'm very happy. I'm very happy that we can be together forever. His brows relaxed, and a smile spread from his eyes to the corners of his mouth. He smiled with unusual satisfaction. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 80. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. / transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here. To facilitate your next reading, you can click on the button at the bottom to record this reading. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Chapter 399. Wei Wei Bai's entire body trembled. A strange power came from the depths of her body. It was given to her by the system for free. The feeling of one's soul being entangled with another's soul was indescribable. She suddenly found that the chains on her hands had broken. She didn't think much about it. She reached out and slapped his face. You trash, you dare to think about me. Traitor, evil creature. Her soul could be broken, but her character couldn't be messed up. Ning Yishu's pupils shrank. He found that the power of his array was beginning to shatter. She still had the strength to resist. He firmly held her body. Master, don't struggle. Let our souls be entangled together. Wei Wei Bai didn't want to be tormented like this, but the system was forcing her. It wasn't easy for her. She could almost see her own soul being torn apart by the two forces. Ning Yishu also felt it. His eyes were filled with fear. If he wasn't careful, her soul would be torn to pieces. He panicked. When he was making the array, he didn't think about going back on his words. So it was impossible to change it. He tried his best to stop the golden power from flowing into her soul, but the array's power had already started. He couldn't stop it. Ning Yishu's anger exploded. He firmly grabbed her shoulder. Looking at her pained face, he finally collapsed. Master, do you hate me that much? You would rather risk your soul being destroyed to resist the formation of your soul? She was clearly a selfish and afraid person. To not be with him, she didn't hesitate to destroy herself. Wei Wei Bai didn't know what to say. This was all the system's fault. She had a hard time carrying it. Moreover, her head was spinning. She couldn't care about his emotions. The two forces in her body were fighting. She felt like she was thrown into a laundry bucket. The world was spinning non-stop. This kind of tearing pain and discomfort was not physical, so even painkillers were useless. Ning Yishu saw her trembling in pain. He felt like his heart was about to split open. He suddenly took out a dagger. The dagger emitted a burst of light. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth condensed. He pulled out the spirit root and completely awakened the heavenly soul in the dagger. He wanted the heavenly soul to destroy his array formation so that it would not wreak havoc in Wei Wei Bai's body. This was the only way to save her. Wei Wei Bai vomited a mouthful of blood. She couldn't help but call out to the system, I'm not going to die like this, am I? This was the first time he had experienced such pain. He felt as if his body was about to be torn into pieces. The system was still rummaging through the cabinets to find something that could suppress Wei Wei Bai's pain, but it wanted to buy a soul-healing item. It was beyond what the two of them could bear. The system suddenly said, "Don't be afraid, I will save you." Now was not the time to be sloppy. It reached out and took out the treasure that it could not use easily. Once this thing was used, it would be in a lot of trouble. But it couldn't care less. Just as he was about to use it, the system suddenly paused. Because the dagger in Ning Yishu's hand had pierced into his own body. He peeled off his skin and cut his flesh, digging into his bones inch by inch, and pulled out his own spirit root. A huge and rich pure golden energy began to overflow from his body. The blood mark on the dagger was slowly dissolved by the golden energy, and his spirit root was also slowly swallowed by the dagger. The pain was bone deep, but it was not as painful as a look of disgust in her eyes. Ning Yishu's bloody hand slowly touched her shocked and frightened face. "Wei Wei, I forced you to get married. I'm so bad, aren't I?" Chapter 400. Wei Wei Bai, I forced you to get married. I'm really bad, aren't I? He revealed a comforting smile, but tears of blood slowly flowed out from his eyes. Once his spiritual root was destroyed, he was like a cripple. Although you don't remember, I said that you can bully whoever you want in the future. If I bully you, I will punish myself. He was only crazily hoping that he could get her. Ning Yishu's mouth leaked blood. He finally dug out his spiritual root, which was completely swallowed by the dagger. The blood mark disappeared. A huge sword appeared, connecting the sky to the earth. Spiritual energy surged. Ning Yishu had lost his spiritual root, so he was a cripple. He reached out to hold the edge of the sword, and his blood seeped in. The sword's light became gentle, enveloping them. Their entangled souls, under the pressure of the sword's light, slowly unraveled. Ning Yishu could clearly feel the sound of their souls separating. Tears of blood flowed down his cheeks. His complexion darkened, and he became thin and haggard. Wei Wei Bai's body also slowly stabilized. She struggled to look at him a few times, her expression complicated. The torment of her soul made her extremely tired. Ning Yishu tried to smile. "You don't want us to get married, so I won't force you. Go to sleep." He gently leaned over, and gently kissed her lips. There was no desire, only tender care. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 85. Wei Wei Bai couldn't hold on, and fainted as soon as she closed her eyes. The system let go of its hand that was holding the treasure chest, and fell silent again. Wei Wei Bai had a splitting headache. She felt like her body had been torn apart several times. Every time, she was crushed into a paper person by a tanker truck, and then blown back by a pump. She struggled to wake up, and saw herself lying on the bed. It was still the room she stayed in at Grand Heavens Mountain. She looked at the favorability, 85. It increased again. Wei Wei Bai thought that she had already erased all of Ning Yishu's favorable impression points. She was very confident in her malicious character. It was so poisonous that he wanted to beat himself to death. His favorability actually increased. Wei Wei Bai was silent for a long time before she knocked on the system. Is Ning Yishu's spiritual root crippled? The system said faintly, it was completely destroyed, so the plot has returned to normal. Ning Yishu is a normal person again. Wei Wei Bai sighed. I think he's been ruined by me. The system said in a deep voice, don't feel guilty. Have you ever seen a male protagonist who doesn't know how to counterattack? Ning Yishu is an authentic and undiscounted good-for-nothing male lead. If you don't beat him into the dust, he won't awaken. Wei Wei Bai asked, how can he make a comeback when his spiritual root is gone? The system said, that's a headache for authors. He can definitely make a comeback. If he doesn't, he can't write a book. Wei Wei Bai suddenly looked up. She heard heavy footsteps. The footsteps stopped in front of her door, and Ning Yishu's voice came. Master. Wei Wei Bai's face was tense. Come in. Ning Yishu walked in with a basin in his hands. He lowered his head, his hair was gray, and his footsteps were heavy but light. He looked much more haggard. People who lost their spiritual roots had no fate with the path of cultivation. Ning Yishu lowered his head and wet the towel, intending to help Wei Wei Bai wash up. Although she was in the nascent soul stage and could use spells to clean herself, he knew that she liked to be served. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, raise your head. Ning Yishu fell silent. His body stiffened. Bai Weiwei angrily reached out and lifted his chin, you. Crossover system, Adonis, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Download Transmigration system, Adonis, come here and read this on your phone, https://m.sashu.com. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.